the Comptroller, IBO, the Department of Finance, and the public. A reminder for members of the public who wish to testify in person, you must fill out a witness slip with the Sergeant at Arms. We've been joined this morning by Council members Joseph, Brewer, Narcisse, Schulman, Ong, Dinowitz, Lewis, Sylvana Powers, Hudson, Ayala, and of course our speaker. And we have Councilmember Caban joining us on Zoom. Before we get started, I want to take a moment to thank the entire City Council Finance Division staff for their efforts preparing for today's hearing, including our CFO, Deputy Chief of Staff to the Speaker, Tanisha Edwards, and our senior staff, Finance Director Rich Lee, Managing Director Jonathan Rosenberg, the Deputy Directors Emra Adev, Chima Obachair, Paul Simone, and Isha Wright, Assistant Director Liz Hoffman, Chief Economist Delara Dimnaku, Supervising Economist Paul Sturm, our unit heads Aliyah Ali, Julia Haramis, Flo Kabore, Jimmy Reyes, Jack Story, our Finance Counsel Kathleen Ahn, and our Committee Counsel Mike Toomey, my Senior Advisor John Yedden, and all of our analysts and support staff who pulled together the information for today's hearing and make magic happen behind the scenes on a daily basis. We're here today to examine the Mayor's $109.4 billion preliminary budget for FY25, which is $4.7 billion less than our current year budget. Before I go any further, I'm going to ask our speaker, Adrienne Adams, to give her opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. Welcome, our OMB partners. I am New York City Council Speaker Adrienne Adams, and I thank Chair Brannan for leading this first budget hearing of the fiscal year 2025 budget cycle, and thank everyone for joining us today. I also want to especially welcome our budget director, Jacques Giha. Today, we will examine the January financial plan that includes the Mayor's $109.4 billion fiscal 2025 preliminary budget. The preliminary budget is balanced after closing the previously projected $7.1 billion gap from the November financial plan and covering additional spending in fiscal years 2024 and 2025 through updated revenue projections and expense changes. These include increased tax revenues, assumed state funding for asylum seeker response services, and re-estimates and reductions to agency and asylum seeker services spending. This latest plan provides OMB's first in-depth update to its tax revenue forecast since the April 2023 financial plan. It catches up with the previous projections by the Council and other forecasters to be more consistent with the increased revenues our city can expect to receive. Yet, with $3.3 billion more expected for fiscal years 2024 and 2025 and more in the out years. This would result in a surplus for these two fiscal years and more manageable gaps in the out years. There will also be in-year reserves available that must be utilized within the same fiscal year. The Mayor's preliminary budget contains a number of omissions and risks that are critical to address in the executive budget, which these additional revenues can help facilitate. There remain key agencies and service areas affected by the administration's repeated cuts that are foundational to meeting the needs of New Yorkers. Critical investments to restore and safeguard essential services and cover anticipated expenses are missing from the Mayor's preliminary budget and must be a priority to secure the health of our city and neighborhoods. Now more than ever, our communities are relying on core services and programs to survive and remain in our city. A recent report by the Robin Hood Foundation and Columbia University found that years of progress have been reversed, with the city experiencing an alarming increase in poverty, the largest in a decade. And as a result, 1 in 4 children and nearly 2 million New Yorkers have been living in poverty. We know from the rising numbers of people seeking SNAP benefits and cash assistance in our neighborhoods that more and more New Yorkers are finding it increasingly difficult to afford basic necessities like food and shelter. Yet, the agency's processing benefits and assistance are not able to keep up. The administration needs to prioritize ensuring adequate support in the budget and its management for city agencies to resolve these problems. The city must reflect our priorities, and the city has a moral imperative to invest in programs that support our residents who need help. One of the other key needs of working families who want to live and raise their children in our city is high-quality early childhood education. The lack of affordable options fuels our affordability crisis that is pushing New Yorkers to leave for other localities and states, weakening our school system, tax base, and economy. Solidifying and strengthening our city's 3K program must be a priority to stem the increases in poverty and hollowing out of the city's middle class. The administration has been cutting funds from 3K programming rather than fixing its management challenges within the DOE that have been destabilizing and left families disconnected. The city budget must advance the promise of a seat for every child who needs it, increasing utilization and returning our city to be a national leader in early childhood education. The city must ensure its public education system is a priority, from our K through 12 schools to our institutions of higher education in CUNY. These are undeniably a key driver of not only the health and safety of our communities, but also our economic success. Our primary and secondary school students, like those across the country, are recovering from historic levels of learning loss as a result of the pandemic. The city budget, along with state and federal budgets, must reflect this reality by ensuring investments in essential programs for our students. Community schools, preschool special education, school mental health services, restorative justice programs, and services for English language learners and homeless students are pivotal for the city to support. CUNY plays a key role in the city's success as our strongest engine of economic mobility that unlocks opportunity for working-class New Yorkers and communities of color. Its graduates also fuel our city and state economy with their contributions of billions of dollars in tax revenue. CUNY has faced budgetary challenges over the past several years, and we must protect and do right by CUNY to maintain the staffing and support programs students need in seeking their degrees. The cuts to library services across the city, from the administration's reduction to the city's funding of neighborhood branches, has impacted the lives of New Yorkers across generations. Our libraries are community hubs that offer programs to New Yorkers of all ages in support of their success. Our communities have already felt the impact of losing Sunday service, and it is imperative that our budget funds libraries to reflect their essential roles in our neighborhoods. Additionally, it is critical that our budget adequately supports New York City's cultural organizations and sector. They are a crucial part of what makes us a world-class city, enriching New Yorkers and play a vital role in our economy by creating opportunities, attracting tourism, and increasing activity for local businesses. The city must not waver in its support of our renowned cultural institutions and provide the essential funding required to support them. While it was welcome news that there will not be forthcoming pegs for the executive budget, many key programs are being restored, and the blanket hiring freeze is being partially lifted. There remains significant work ahead to ensure a sound budget that meets the needs of our city. Above all, the basic goal of any city budget is ensuring our city agencies have the resources needed to deliver essential services to New Yorkers. With higher than expected revenues in this fiscal year and a durable, resilient economy, I believe our city has the flexibility to reverse many cuts that have been made, strengthen our city's workforce, and address our future fiscal challenges, all while being fiscally responsible. I look forward to hearing from you, Director Jiha, about the administration's fiscal year 25 preliminary budget and how it aims to support all New Yorkers. Before closing, I also want to thank the Council's finance staff for their hard work and preparation for today's crucial hearing. And now I turn it back over to Chair Brannan for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Speaker Adams. 3 months ago in these chambers, the Finance Committee held a hearing on the Mayor's November financial plan. At the time, we questioned the administration on yet another proposed round of pegs, and we challenged the need for an across-the-board hiring freeze that we said was too blunt and crude for what was in front of us. A scythe was used when the moment called for a scalpel. At the time, we noted the administration was operating on outdated information, and we forecast that city revenues would be significantly higher than what the administration was pointing to as the reason for the proposed cuts. In the months since, bit by bit, the administration has indeed reversed course on both their pegs and the hiring freeze, and has updated their forecast of revenues to largely match the outlook the council had projected about 3 months ago, back when we were told that council economists were being too liberal with our forecast. Since then, we've seen the economic outlook brighten even further. In its December meeting, the Fed signaled that policy rates would start declining in 2024. January unemployment was up over 350,000 jobs, and December's job gains were revised up by another 100,000 jobs. Based on this improving outlook, the council has increased its forecast, and we now expect the remainder of FY24 into FY25 to generate approximately $3.3 billion more in tax revenue than in OMB's current projections today. Despite this improved outlook, the council's forecast expects tax revenue growth to average a moderate 3.3% through the financial plan, staying below the robust 5.5 rates we saw in the last decade. This expected revenue addresses some of the out-year gaps, but there's still work to be done to resolve them fully. That is to say, the council is not blind to the economic uncertainty ahead. Further potential costs imposed by the state budget, like the intercept of the hospital fund sales tax and imposing a rate increase of state FEPS housing vouchers without the equivalent state funding, are on the table right now. Last month, the Speaker and I testified before the state legislature about the burdens these costs would add to the city, along with the policy recommendations to increase affordable housing, which would also thereby boost growth in the city's construction sector. We know you share our goal of ensuring the city receives the funding we deserve from Albany, and we must work together to reverse these unfair cost shifts. It's important that we recognize not only how much tax revenue New York City sends to Albany each year, but that our city and our state's successes are inextricably linked. As we move forward in examining and shaping the budget to come, everybody at the negotiating table must walk in the room and work off the same accurate and shared set of data and facts. New York City's working families cannot afford the whiplash of unnecessary cuts and reversals to essential services. As the co-equal branch of our government, City Council urges the administration to put forward an objective assessment of the city's economy, and we look forward to continued dialogue and negotiations in good faith. I'll now turn it over to my committee counsel, Mike Toomey, to swear in OMB for their testimony. First, I'll acknowledge we've also been joined by council members Carr, Osei, and Powers. Mike? And Riley as well, Councilmember Riley.
Good morning. You raise your right hands, please. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and to respond honestly to council member questions? Jacques Jiha? Is your mic on?
Yes.
Thank you. Latanya McKinney?
Yes.
Ken Godner?
Yes.
Thank you. You may begin.
Good morning, Speaker Adams, Chair Brennan, and members of the Finance Committee and City Council. Thank you for the opportunity to testify here today about the fiscal year 2025 preliminary budget. I am Jacques Jiha, Director of the New York City Mayor's Office of Management and Budget. I'm joined today by OMB First Deputy Director, Ken Godner, and Senior Deputy Director for Intergovernmental Relations and Education, Latanya McKinney. Late last summer, we were caring for nearly 60,000 asylum seekers, and more than 95,000 had passed through our shelter systems. Our forecast of the cost of caring for the migrants is based in part on the number of households in our care and an estimate of the number that will arrive in upcoming years. In late summer, we updated our cost forecast, because we saw growth in household arrivals escalating faster than previously expected. At the time, we were clear that this was our reality unless circumstances changed. The cost of the crisis was staggering, and along with the cost of settling labor agreements with our workforce and sunsetting of stimulus funds, pushed fiscal year 2024 far out of balance and drove the fiscal year 25 gap to a very high level. On top of these concerns, the national economy was fragile because of the Federal Reserve restrictive monetary stance. The question for most economists was not whether we would be in recession, but when. Given these budget stresses and fiscal uncertainties, the mayor asked us to take immediate action to stabilize the city's finances. He gave me clear directions. First, do not expect the federal cavalry to ride to the rescue. Following his many trips to Washington, D.C. to advocate for assistance, he realized we will not receive timely and meaningful federal assistance to help deal with the migrant crisis by the November plan. Second, we could not impose an undue burden on New Yorkers by raising property taxes. Homeowners were already struggling to make ends meet because of high inflation, and commercial property owners were facing record vacancy rate and therefore could not absorb a tax increase. Third, we had to minimize service disruptions because the city must stay safe and clean and a welcoming place to work, live, and raise a family. Fourth, no layoffs of city workers. As we had promised in August, because the federal government had not changed the circumstances, we did. We had to do everything within our power to remain balanced in fiscal year 24 and ultimately balance fiscal year 25 without harming New Yorkers. This meant making tough, smart, and creative decisions to achieve substantial levels of saving and moderate new spending. We did not have the luxury of time, so we drafted and implemented a plan immediately because making the tough but necessary adjustments early would stabilize the city's finances more quickly. In September, OMB advised agencies that there would be peg on 5% of city-funded spending in the November financial plan and the preliminary and executive budgets. We also imposed a hiring freeze with exceptions for critical positions that generate revenue or support public health and public safety. Further, the mayor also issued a directive that froze OTPS spending. These measures could be reevaluated later if the economy improves substantially or the federal and or state governments meaningfully increase aid. Because we are partners in the city's budget process and share the twin goals of caring for asylum seekers and protecting the city's fiscal integrity, I shared the plan with the Speaker, Finance Chair, and other Council leadership on September 9, 4 days before city agencies were notified. At the time, I stated that we would begin implementing solutions in November because front-loading them early in the budget cycle would increase the likelihood of stabilizing the financial plan quickly, which would allow us to relax measures that might be painful for New Yorkers before we release the executive budget. Our strategy was prudent and effective and ultimately succeeded. The November plan PEG generated $3.7 billion in savings over fiscal years 24 and 25. Despite these savings, we still faced a historically large $7.1 billion budget gap in fiscal year 25. And after the November plan was released, we recognized nearly $3 billion in unfunded needs, including support for cash and rental assistance programs. This meant that by law, we had less than 60 days to cover $10 billion hole in the preliminary budget. This was a serious challenge, but we had a plan, and we executed that plan. The preliminary budget PEG generated $3.1 billion in savings over fiscal year 24 and 25. This included $1.7 billion in asylum seeker cost reduction savings that was achieved by lowering household per diem costs and reducing the rate of growth in the asylum seekers census. In total, our November and January PEGs generated $6.6 billion in gap closing savings across fiscal year 24 and 25 after restoration, a record level. Pursuant to the mayor's directive, 95% of the agency savings over the 2 years had no impact on service delivery to New Yorkers. As a result of these decisive and timely actions, along with better than anticipated economic performance in late 2023 that drove our tax revenue forecast upward by $1.3 billion in fiscal year 24 and $1.6 billion in fiscal year 25, we balanced fiscal year 24 and the $109.4 billion fiscal year 25 preliminary budget. Now, let me be very clear. Tax revenue growth of nearly $2.9 billion over fiscal year 24 and 25 could not have closed the $10 billion hole. This was not simply a revenue problem. Indeed, the general plan savings, combined with the new tax revenue, were not enough to close the $10 billion hole. So we had to tap into other resources to close the fiscal year 25 gap. We applied $1.4 billion in current year reserves and recognized non-tax revenues of $650 million. We assumed $1.5 billion in state aid for migrants, of which we are promised $1.1 billion, and about $270 million in pension funds savings, among other things. By taking these steps, we balanced fiscal year 24 and 25 as required by law and reduced out-year gaps meaningfully by an average of nearly 20%. Also, we are going to fiscal year 25 with near record reserves of $8.2 billion, which is more than 10% of city revenue. We also reduced the risks in the financial plan and increased transparency by addressing long-ignored fiscal cliffs, invested more than $440 million in additional resources for city FEPS vouchers in fiscal year 24, and added resources for asylum seekers in the out years. Because we stabilized the city's budget and its outlook, we were able to restore several savings initiatives that support mayoral priorities. This includes funding for the upcoming police academy class, community schools, a parks job training program, and full litter basket collections for 23,000 bins across the city. Our fiscal management approach was validated last week by the State Comptroller in his review of the preliminary budget. And 2 weeks ago, the 4 leading credit rating agencies, namely Moody's, S&P, Fitch, and KBRA, cited our strong management in the face of many challenges as a reason to uphold the city's high credit ratings and stable outlook. More importantly, they emphasize the the success of the measures we took to help close budget gaps in fiscal year 24 and 25, and praise our strong management of the city's finances, with Moody's crediting, quote, our robust financial management in support of their affirmation. Because of our successful PEGs and better than expected economy, we have, as promised, reassessed the need for additional savings measures. Accordingly, the mayor canceled the fiscal year 25 executive budget agency pay. Further, we are moving from a full hiring freeze to a 2-for-1 attrition hiring model, meaning agencies will be permitted to hire one employee for every 2 that depart, so long as they remain within the budgeted headcount. Positions that are directly related to public health and safety, generate revenue, or advance critical services like administering public assistance benefits will be permitted to hire on a 1-for-1 basis. We are also easing the OTPS freeze restrictions with the exceptions of city-funded travel, consultant, IT expenditures, and advertising. But let me emphasize, stabilizing the budget does not mean we are out of the woods. We still have a long way to go. We remain very concerned about asylum seeker funding, particularly in the out years, so we'll be reducing costs by an additional 10% in the executive budget, requiring savings of close to $600 million across fiscal year 24 and 25. Our strategy will remain consistent. Control the census and reduce household per diem costs without impacting critical services. And as we typically do over the final months of the budget cycle, we will work with agencies to identify on their spending savings. Though we are taking action to reduce the cost of caring for the migrants, as of the end of February, we have just spent over $4 billion to care for more than 170,000 asylum seekers who have passed through our care since the spring of 2022. We need more help from the state and federal government to cover these expenses and what we will spend in the future. To conclude, by executing the plan we presented to you last fall and taking swift actions, our fiscal position has stabilized, and we avoided additional budget cuts that would have impacted each and every New Yorker. Nonetheless, we will remain vigilant because there are uncertainties and risks related to the local and global economies, and we face headwinds from the state, including $200 million of cost shifts next fiscal year. As we get closer to budget adoption, I look forward to working with the Council on our many joint priorities in order to support our recovery, promote public health and safety, expand opportunity, and invest in the lives of everyday New Yorkers. Thank you, and I look forward to taking your questions.
Thank you, Director. We've also been joined by Council Members Krishnan, Sanchez, and Moya on Zoom. And now I'm going to hand it over to our speaker for the first round of questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Greetings again to our OMB team. Just want to back up and talk a little bit about PEGs and the exemptions regarding PEGs. In the November plan, all agencies were required to provide PEGs equal to 5% of their city-funded adopted budgets. In the January plan, agencies were again required to provide 5% PEGs, but this time certain agencies were exempted while others were allowed to provide PEGs that were below the 5% requirement. What was the decision-making process for determining those agencies that weren't included in the preliminary plan PEG, and for those that did not have to meet the 5% preliminary plan?
Madam Speaker, it's basically these were what we did at the beginning of the process was the mayor decided that public safety and cleanliness and to some extent and education were the priorities of his administration. And as a result, make the decision to basically exempt NYPD sanitation and FDNY. And as we go through the process, all agencies submitted the PEG, and the mayor reviewed all of them and made the decision that certain agencies, given the resources that they have and are critical some of the services that they provide, make the decision to exempt partially some of these agencies from the full PEG that they submitted. Basically, it comes down to decision about priorities of the administration and also how much of an impact, okay, given their budget, given the resources that they have at their disposal, that they could not meet the PEG target without impacting critical services.
So you're saying the mayor's priorities were primarily NYPD, FDNY, and I think another one. In looking at the overall needs of the city, though, there were significant agencies that were not exempted or provided with reduced PEGs, particularly those for which the PEG directly impacted on service provision for New Yorkers, like the Department of Cultural Affairs and others. So any idea, or did you have any input in the decision-making process about impact on pertinent city agencies that would impact the New Yorkers significantly?
We agree that the cultural institutions and libraries are critical to the functioning of New York City for New York City residents. And that's the reason why, for instance, we exempted the cultural institutions from the first 4 PEGs, okay? At the same time, we did the libraries from the general PEG. But as you can imagine, as I stated, we're dealing with a major, was a all-hands on deck approach in terms of all agencies were required, okay, to meet the 5% PEG targets that we communicated to them in January. So as I said, as we review, we go through the review process, and we look at the resources that the agencies have at their disposal, and we look at the impact, the direct impact on, in terms of the critical services that they provide. The mayor made the decision to basically provide partial exemption. DOE was one of the agencies, okay, given the impact that the mayor see that would have on classrooms, made the decision to say, you know what, I'm going to exempt partially, okay, and DOE and other agencies from the PEGs. So it's a question of what kind of resources that they have at their disposal and what is the impact on critical services. And those are the major drivers that drove the decision to exempt some agencies and include others.
Okay. As far as restorations are concerned, the preliminary financial plan includes the restoration of over $65 million of programs in fiscal year 2024 and $129 million in fiscal year 2025 for a variety of items that were included in the November plan, PEG, including FDNY staffing, the NYPD Police Academy class, and sanitation litter basket pickup. Why were the items restored in the preliminary plan chosen? Why were these items chosen for restoration?
Again, as I said, it comes right back to priorities of the administration and the impact on critical services. As I stated, the restoration amounted to about $195 billion, which is less than 3% of the overall PEG, okay, which was about like before the restoration of about $7 billion. So again, as I said, they were restored simply because of the impact, the potential negative impact that the mayor see that they would have, and whether or not the agency can absorb, okay, the PEGs. So, and when we look back and see that cleanliness would be impacted, public safety would be impacted, parks would be impacted, because we look at their budget to see if they really have resources that they could absorb it. And once we review and we realize it was very difficult for them, DSS the same, all these agencies. So we exempted a number of them and we provided partial exemption to some of these agencies.
Was any consideration made for restoring other agencies, like the $22 million for the library systems that would enable them to continue to reinstate service 7 days a week?
We explore, and as I said, we agree with you. We wish we could have restored a lot of things, but again, we're dealing with a major financial crisis, and that requires a lot of resources. So if we believe that some of the agencies have the wherewithal to absorb, the PEG, it's, we basically have to take those resources and reallocate them somewhere else, and which is what I've been doing. So we got to a point where it's extremely difficult for me to say at this moment in time, given the conditions where we are, that many of these PEG savings can be restored. However, if financial conditions improved, and the economy remains strong, we will work with the council, as we always do, to look at the priorities of the council and the administration, and then to see what can be fully or partially restored.
Now, Director, you just said something very, very critical to me that caught my ear, the priorities of the administration and the council.
Yes.
What happened to that interaction, that collaboration in these first rounds that we were just discussing over the past 10 minutes?
What I discussed, Madam Speaker, is we look, many of the same priorities that we have are also your priorities. We restore community schools, we restore a bunch of things.
I didn't hear that in the first part of your response.
okay.
I heard the mayor, they were the mayor's priorities. That's what I just heard.
Okay. I'm sorry if that's what you heard, because I meant to say, when I meant the admin, it's, I'm talking about the city in general, because we hear from the public, we hear the complaints from the public, and basically we make the adjustment based on the complaints that we receive and from the public.
Okay, I'm just going to state for the record that the priorities, the initial priorities given, NYPD, FDNY, others are very, very important, but they were not given with consideration of the council. This body is responsible for oversight hearings to discover those priorities for the city, and any subsequent priorities or decisions made should have been a collaborative effort as far as priorities were concerned, and the consideration of the council should have been in mind as well. The mayor recently announced that the PEG originally scheduled for the executive plan would not be implemented, but in light of these actions, can we expect to see further PEG restorations in the executive plan?
As I just indicated, as we get closer to adoption, if the economy remains very strong and improves better than we anticipate, we will have discussion with the council, as we always do, in terms of identifying our joint priorities, and if there are things that can be partially or fully restored, we'll discuss them with you.
And they will be discussed together?
They will be discussed together.
Thank you. Let's talk about asylum seeker responses and PEGs assigned to this particular category. As part of the preliminary plan, the administration has decreased the citywide planned expenditure for the asylum seeker response effort by $500 million in fiscal year 2024 and $1.2 billion in fiscal year 2025, a nearly 16% reduction of the expenses over the 2 fiscal years. The administration has indicated that these savings were generated from a variety of actions, including the implementation of shelter time limit notices, efficiencies in HERC contracts, a shift of some HERC contracts to nonprofit providers, and the recognition of current census trends. Can you walk us through the assumptions of the revised forecast by providing what changes to census trends are now included and how they differ from the last forecast you provided in August 2023?
Yes, as we discussed before, the strategy is basically twofold. Is on the one hand, our goal is to reduce the per diem costs to generate savings by changing the staffing model, changing the service model that we have, thereby changing the staffing model, and moving away from for-profit providers to non-for-profit providers. So this is the strategies that we're using on the trying to minimize, reduce the per diem costs. That should generate about $700 million in savings. On the other hand, on the other side, we're trying to reduce the census because it is very critical that we bring down the census. And the 30 days, 60-day policy are part of the entire package of bringing down the census. As you can imagine, why reducing the census is very critical for us is, as you know, we have over-relied on PEG to fund the asylum seeker crisis. So this is not something that is sustainable in the long run. Okay, so therefore, we have to bring down the population. Otherwise, we're going to have to find a new source of funding, okay, to keep this going if it were, to stay as is. So therefore, we have to bring down the census. And the 30 days and 60-day policies are critical, very, very, very critical, okay, to the part of the strategy that we're using to bring down the census.
I know my colleagues want to talk to you about that in particular, but I'm going to ask how much of the cost reduction is the result of shelter time limit notices?
We currently, as I said, we indicated to you that $1 billion of the savings that we plan on taking is basically assuming that we're going to bring down or stabilizing the census. And the 30 and 60-day policy right now is a big piece of that strategy because that's all we have. As you can imagine, what we see, historically there's a 50% retention rate, 49% retention rate. In other words, after 30 days, people leave the system on their own. With the 30 days and 60-day policy, we have an additional 33% of people leaving, okay, bringing us the retention rate down to like 16%. So it's very important. It's a big piece of the strategy that we have in terms of driving down the population, because if you don't drive down the population, I don't know how we're going to sustain this in the long run. Because as I said, we have over-relied on PEGs in the first year and a half to fund the asylum seeker crisis.
What are the exit and reentry assumptions being utilized for each population type? Single adults, adult families, and families with children?
Yeah. Currently, the assumption that we're using is overall, we're looking at, when we did the last forecast, we had, in August, we assumed that we had like 55 households. Now, our forecast is about 29 households per day. We're looking at it as family with children, like 61 inflow of 61, outflow of 40. So the net change is about like 21. Single adult, we have 235 inflow and 225 outflow for a net of 10. So overall, we have like 29 households. That's the assumption we're using now instead of the 55 that we used at the beginning last summer.
Okay. What is the current per diem cost?
The current per diem cost is about $388. It was up to $385. Right. We brought it down to $388. Our plan up to throughout 2024 is to keep it to an average of about like $386, and then for 25 to bring it down to about $352. But we're making significant progress on a month-to-month basis since we implemented the strategy. For instance, last month, the per diem for the month was about like 274, much below the 388 that we have on average for the year.
Okay. Do you have a breakdown for us of the PEG savings by the type of savings and by agency?
The savings, I don't have it by agencies, but I would provide you exactly, as I said, the way we're trying to come up with the savings is by bringing down the households in the aggregate, okay? Bringing down the cost per diem per day, and at the same time managing down, okay, the census. And most of the census exit we're seeing right now is basically driven by, in the HERC system. So, you know, and it's a combination of HPD and H&H, but we will try to provide you the breakdown as we move forward.
Okay, thank you. On February 21st of this year, a few weeks ago, the mayor announced that there will be an additional 10% PEG on asylum seeker response costs in addition to the 20% PEG in the preliminary plan. How does the administration anticipate generating these additional savings?
We are still working on a plan, and when the executive budget is released, we'll have more detail. But again, we're going to continue on the same path, which is bringing down the per diem cost. That is, we have contracts that are about to expire, okay, issue new RFPs for those contracts, move away as much as we can from private providers to non-for-profit providers. This is the same strategy we're going to continue to utilize, and continue to utilize the strategy of bringing down the population, the census. Because as I said, this is the key piece of this. We have seen a decrease in the census, okay, lately, because it was up to like 69,000. We're down to below 65,000 now. So it's significant progress. Our goal is to continue to bring down the census.
Okay. We've spoken previous hearings about the difference with the HERC management, H&H, DHS, different responsibilities in the way that we're handling asylum seekers, shelter residents. So I just want to ask this final question for this round. Does the administration have any plan to transition HERCs operated by H&H to DHS to reduce costs?
Yes, we do. Actually, we are in the process of transitioning 3 of them to DHS. Okay, and that should save us about like $69 million.
Do you know which 3?
I could provide you the names, yes. I would follow up with you to provide you the names.
And what were the savings?
It's about $69 million.
About $69 million. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But again, this is part of the strategy we are using going forward.
Okay.
It's just a question of, you know, we have to find a small one, because the big one, we just don't find. We issue RFPs, we have not received any response from many of the not-for-profit in the city, okay, to participate. So we're still in the process of trying to get these people to participate so that we could see if we could get more and more and more not-for-profit to take over some of these operations. But this is the strategy going forward.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Speaker. We've also been joined by Council Members Farias, Stevens, Williams, and Rivera. I wanted just to stay for a second on the bond ratings. I guess, you know, in the press releases that I've seen recently, you know, reaffirming the city's bond rating from Fitch and Moody's, they both mention that the city's revenue forecasts are generally conservative. Obviously, I understand the rationale for approaching revenue forecasts conservatively in periods of growth to ensure we don't overspend, but I guess, is there not a concern that an overly conservative revenue estimate will lead to unnecessary service reductions?
No. The challenge that you have is, as we say to folks all the time, OMB cannot afford to make a mistake when it comes to revenue forecasts. Because if we overstate our forecast and we spend the resources, we have to cut, okay? So it's not like we say, you know what, hey, we overstate our forecast and there are no ramifications to it. So therefore, we would rather build up rather than basically cut. People think we take pleasure, okay, in cutting services or cutting programs. Not at all. Okay, we all come to government, okay, to basically make a difference. Okay, So we have to be extremely conservative because there are ramifications to what we do. So overstating our forecast, spend the resources, and then, oops, you made a mistake, and then you have to cut back, to reverse, it's a lot worse, okay? Then basically say, you know what, I'm conservative, I'm going to try to manage my budget as conservative as I can. If, okay, we are successful in terms of managing our budget, and if we are successful that the economy, okay, is growing, continue to grow, okay, it's icing on the cake. We could add things on top of where we are, because at that time we know we have those resources. But if we don't have those resources, I'm hoping that you're right. I'm hoping that your forecast is right, because it's a forecast. You could be right or you could be wrong, okay? I'm hoping that you're right, okay? But this is a forecast. So, and we making decisions, okay, that are real, okay, that are baseline on a forecast that can be right or wrong. So if you're going to make long-term decision on a forecast, you're better off being conservative to know that the revenue is going to be there to support the program going forward.
Okay. But when you said that the council was being too liberal and then your forecast was actually higher than ours, is that just because you were working on outdated information?
No, what happened is everybody was surprised to see how strong the economy was in the latter part of 2023. Everyone, okay? Everyone on Wall Street, everyone, okay? Everyone was looking for a soft landing of the economy, a recession, mostly, last year. And we end up with a soft landing, a better, not even a soft landing, something better than a soft landing, okay? So, and as a result, we had to revise upward our forecast, okay? But your forecast also assume a slowdown of the economy. So it's not like just us assuming a slowdown of the economy. We all assume a slowdown of the economy. The difference you're talking about, it's $1 billion here and there, okay? In the scope of things, $100 billion economy, okay, a forecast of, it's a very small portion, it's a very small piece. So again, as I said, you are always better off being conservative because you are making long-term decisions, okay, all right, based on a forecast. So you're better off, okay, being very conservative, and if, okay, the economy is stronger than you anticipate, it's icing on a cake.
So, what extent do you think your current forecast, with this continued strength that we're talking about, can we expect to see an adjustment in the executive budget?
We will review, as we always do, our forecast in the executive budget. And when we release it, we will see we'll see where we are, whether or not we're in line with your forecast. At this point in time, I cannot tell you because we already revised up our forecast based, okay, on the stronger than anticipated economy that we had at the end of fiscal year, at the end of 2023. Okay, so if the economy remains strong, okay, it would be reflected in our forecast. If it weakens, it also will be reflected in our forecast.
I'm going to go back to the speaker was focusing on the asylum seeker spending. How much new state asylum seeker funding for the city is in the governor's budget?
In terms of the new commitment, it's about in our plan that we would be getting $1.5 billion from the state, and in reality we got 1.1. So therefore we have a shortfall of about $400 million right now that we have to backfill.
Do you think the state's doing enough?
I'm sorry?
Do you think the state is doing enough?
No, we made it clear that at a minimum, we should be getting at a minimum 50-50 share because the assumption that the governor is using is to give us was based on receiving a third of the cost, but we're getting less than a third. So we're getting only $1.1 billion, which is about, like, I believe at 29%, something like that, of the cost. So again, we are short right now. We are, because the assumption was based on the fact, on the assumption that the federal government was going to provide us at least a third. We're not getting a third from the federal government. We're only getting very little from the federal government, about like $140-some billion. So
What's the total we've
So we're
received?
carrying most of the costs.
What's the total we've received from DC so far?
So far, we receive about like $40 million, I believe. I think, yeah, so far we have gotten, but we're in the process.
What, say that again?
About 40-something million dollars we have received, collected actually. The commitment is about like 146 million something.
So far from the federal government?
156. And we believe we collected so far $49 million.
So all in, we've received less than $50 million from the federal government?
Yes, so far, yes. We're in the process of trying to collect the $1.7 million, the balance, but
This is all reimbursements?
Yeah. The requirements are so stringent that it's almost it's very difficult for us to do so. But we're working on it to try to collect the remaining $107 million.
Yeah. So this year it was unique because the city and the state released their budgets simultaneously, and then the preliminary plan for the city estimated the state support before the governor's budget was released. So what changes will we need to make if the executive budget stays as it was proposed?
Right now, we're talking about $600 million. Because we have about $400 million shortfall in terms of expectation of the asylum seeker grant that we expected from the state. And the state also took a number of actions that would cost us about like $200 million, including, like we said, the sales tax intercept and foundation aid, because they changed the formula. That's also going to cost us money. So you're talking about another $200 million of cost shifts onto the city. So overall, right now, we're looking at $600 million.
And the governor has indicated that expenses for Randall's Island, Creedmoor, and Floyd Benefield will be fully covered by the state. So does the governor's proposed budget allocate the full amount to cover?
Yes. The governor's budget currently provided some $600 million for these three sites. The challenge we have, I believe, Randall's Islands is funded for 2,000 people. We currently have like 3,000 people. And
So it's
Creedmoor,
Randall's Island's funded for 2,000. Right now we've
currently
got,
have 3,000. And I believe Creedmoor funded for 1,000. We have 1,100 folks there. So the issue is whether we're going to absorb that difference, the 1,100 people that we currently have above what the governor is funding. So we'll be working with the state and continue to lobby the state so that the state covers the excess that we currently have at Randall's Island and also at Creedmoor.
okay, I want to move on to headcount. The council obviously applauds the administration for lifting the hiring freeze, as you know, we continue to hear that many agencies are skeletal and struggle to provide the crucial services. So with the city vacancy rate, though lower than in prior years, it's still well above pre-pandemic levels, while actual headcount is more than 15,000 less than FY20. So a couple of things. Now that the hiring freeze has been lifted, will the city reinstitute hiring halls? And I guess equally important is, will OMB authorize agencies to expeditiously fill vacancies?
We are in constant communications with agencies about their needs, and we will do everything within our power to expedite our review as long as the agencies remain within the hiring and compensation guidelines. Regarding the hiring hall, we will work with DCAS to make sure that agencies have the resources that they need to carry their mandate. I don't know if they're going to do a hiring war, but we will work with them.
How will positions be deemed a high priority and exempted from the hiring freeze be treated now that the hiring freeze is lifted?
We have hiring freeze is lifted, but we have a 2-for-1 in place. In other words, agency could only replace one person for every two that depart. Again, we continue to work with these agencies. The critical positions continue to remain exempted from the hiring freeze. They could always in the past, any position that deemed critical. Okay, we exempted them in the past, and we'll continue to exempt them.
So we've seen a number of indicators in the preliminary mayor's management report that were concerning. As for example, the HRA's processing of SNAP benefits. And we hear from commissioners and deputy commissioners that the reason for the decline or the slowness in these services is because of just a lack of staff. So do you believe that there's any correlation between recent headcount reductions and the decline in these PMMR indicators?
When it comes to HRA, we have exempted the benefits specialists, those people that process the benefits. They were exempted to begin with as part of the exercise. And actually, they hire about I believe 700 new staff.
700 new HRA employees that process benefits?
Yep.
And that's since when?
And also, remember, the PMMR only covers the first 4 months of the fiscal year. Since then, we have made significant progress, okay? Basically, to give you, to put things in perspective for you, the backlog that we have in SNAP is down to about 400, okay, from a peak of 4,000. Which is a 90% reduction. That is, okay.
Wait, there's a lot of numbers here. So you're saying right now there's only 400 HRA applications where it's a
for SNAP application, the backlog.
SNAP, sorry, yeah.
Okay, it's about 400 application from a peak of 4,000 in July. Okay, that's a 90% reduction. Cash assistance. Okay, the backlog is 1,100. It's a 97% reduction. This is from a peak, I believe, of 40,000, 46,000, okay? So we invested significant amount of resources, okay, in terms of technology, process changes, trying to get waivers from the state, process reengineering, okay? I mean, I believe there's an announcement this morning about all the progress that has been made, okay, on the cash assistance and basically on the staff front. We work with the agencies, provided all the headcounts that they needed. And again, we have a lot of poor people, okay, in the city, okay? That's the reason why we have a lot of people applied, okay, for the programs, and that's one of the reasons why is you had a long backlog. But since then, we have made significant progress in terms of reducing the backlog.
Okay, I have a couple more, and I want to turn it to my colleagues. Talk about the capital budget. The preliminary capital commitment plan is $5.9 billion less than the adopted commitment plans for FY 24 through 28. There's a number of large-scale capital programs and projects that may be under-budgeted or not yet included in this plan. Do you believe that the prelim capital commitment plan accurately accounts for the city's future capital needs?
The challenge, as you know, we have is the city's overall capital budget is limited by the debt ceiling. Okay. We are operating very close to our debt capacity right now. we have 3 major projects. Okay, if we don't get the expansion that we're looking from the state in terms of TFA expansion, 3 big projects would consume every single thing that we have left in terms of debt capacity. That is school construction authority, okay, in terms of their own needs, the board-based jail, additional resources that we need, and for the BQE, okay? So therefore, that's the reason why we're lobbying the state and the governor included in the budget about like $12 billion in terms of additional debt capacity to see if we could meet some of the needs that we have. So as you stated, we have a lot of needs, but we are very, very constrained, okay, by our debt capacity. So therefore, like you said, there is the capital plan, okay, I would not say reflect fully, okay, the true challenges that we're facing in terms of our infrastructure in New York City.
So the governor, including the TFA debt limit increase as part of her executive budget proposal, is not giving you the confidence to recommit or restore those projects?
This is a proposal. Okay, we have to wait until the executive budget in April to know if it is included. If it is included, we will make an assessment and see what can be moved back to where they were before. And we will do a reassessment as part of the executive budget.
Okay. The real property tax forecast and the property assessments. So the administration published its preliminary tax forecast prior to the release of the FY25 tentative roll, the assessment roll. Based on the new info, do you have a different outlook on your levy assumptions?
Yes, we will. Our assumption was a bit more conservative than the tentative roll, so we will adjust as part of the executive budget our billable as we go forward in the executive budget.
So you expect a change in the executive?
We expect a change in the executive.
Okay. Okay, last 1 or 2 things from me. In previous hearings, we've asked about the city's effort to find savings and efficiencies in the city's suite of tax expenditures and annual tax breaks that are focused on economic development. In the past, your response has been that those savings accrue to out years and are of little use in the addressing budget concerns of the current and upcoming fiscal year. However, as we see economic and tax revenue outlooks improving, I think it's becoming clear that the out years is where the real stress on the budget is, and perhaps we need to start thinking now about how we balance the budget several years down the road. Do you believe that there are savings that could be found in the city's tax expenditures?
Of course, we are not saying that they should not be reviewed and reevaluated. We are simply saying that they cannot be used for gap closures this year or next because they are often awarded for like 20 years or more. So we always review tax expenditures when they come up for renewal or for expansion. So if there's an opportunity to modernize them, we will always do and try to find savings. It's just a question of, from our perspective, is we're trying to deal with gap closures this year, next year, and these things are way out there 20, 30 years. It's really extremely, and more importantly, it's not things that we can do alone. We have to go to the state. Okay.
Cool. It's something we'd love to work with you on.
Yeah, we will definitely want to work with you, but again, as I said, it's just the challenge as we did for gap closing, but we will be more than happy to work with you to modernize many of them.
Okay, last thing for me, the federal SALT, the state and local tax cap, is set to expire next year, 2025, which is expected to impact the timing of New York State tax collections from PIT, personal income tax components, and the pass-through entity tax. Does OMB expect any shifts in the New York City tax collection timing between the fiscal years due to SALT expiring?
In terms of the timing, we have not yet analyzed this to see if that would have an impact on the city. But again, it depends on what the change is going to be. I'm assuming it's not going to go back to, the same, what we had before. So we have to wait to see what the new policies are before we could basically do an evaluation of these policies to give you a sense what would be the impact on New York City.
Did OMB incorporate the salt expiration into the tax forecast for PIT?
No.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Director. I'm going to now turn it to Deputy Speaker Ayala for questions.
Thank you and good morning. I think it's still morning.
Morning.
I have a number of questions, but before I get into those questions, I wanted to kind of go back a little bit on the capital budget. Because I'm trying to get a sense of like where we are in regards to, our debt capacity and what we should be expecting in the next few months. I know that I've received, and I'm sure a couple of other members have as well, calls from different city agencies alerting us that projects that have been funded for a number of years will now be put on pause because of budget cuts. During the same time frame, we're also getting calls saying, "Oh well, good." On the the good news is that the admin is also funding new projects here, and here, and so that doesn't really balance out for me, because if we don't have the budget capacity to fund projects that have been in the pipeline for a substantial amount of years, then, and I get it, we have a new administration, that administration has their own priorities, but then how does that compare to, the consummate priorities that have been, laid out for years? I mean, I have projects that were put on pause, one of them I think has been in the pipeline for 10 years.
Yeah. As I stated to you, we have a major challenge in front of us, which is the debt capacity that we have. This is real. Okay. I keep telling folks this is a real problem. And what makes it even worse, to be honest with you, I'm going to be as honest as can be with you here, is the fact that even though we know we're not going to spend the money for the borough-based jail by 2027, we have to keep it there. Okay? We know the timeline that was created for the borough-based jail was prior to COVID. We put the capital plan on pause for a year and a half. Nothing took place. But yet we expect the same timeline to continue when there was a pause, okay, in the entire capital program for a year and a half. So we know it's not going to happen by 2027, but yet we have to keep the funding, okay, same timeline up to 2027. So we cannot move that funding beyond 2027. So therefore, that funding is consuming all the capacity that we have. So therefore, we have very little left. So therefore, we have to move everything in the back. Okay, because of the funding challenge that we have up front. So it's when I hear people say, "Oh, we don't have a lot of things, new things added to the capital plan." Okay, as I said, we are struggling to try to maintain three things. Okay, SCA, borough-based jail, additional resources for the borough-based jail, and for the BQE. So we're not talking about new things. Two of these things are mandated, SCA and the borough-based jail. So this is where we are. It's not like we have capital that we're spending left and right. No, we don't. What we're trying to do right now is juggle, trying to create room wherever we can, just basically to try to accommodate those things.
I have such a hard time just being as honest as I want to be, because I really, really like you. But the idea that the mayor is not purposely picking and choosing which projects he wants to fund, it's not factual. And I did receive, notification, "Hey, council member, great news. You're getting two new playground renovations." I need those 2 playground renovations. I welcome those 2 playground renovations. But then 2 days later, I get a call, well, you're getting 4 projects that are getting cut. One of those projects happens to be, it was funded under the de Blasio administration in a development that has the highest rates of gun violence in the entire district. They have no community center. It's been very problematic. And if you want to deal with all of the other social issues, right, you have to get to the root of them, and you have to bring in those resources. So to me, if I have to choose, right, and I hate to choose, and I don't even want to be in your position, between 2 playgrounds or that community center, then my priority is the community center, because it's going to keep my kids safe and possibly avoid them from getting shot in the street. And so those conversations are not happening between the administration and our offices, and that's problematic. The idea that the borough-based jail funding is there and we can't move it, I'd ask, how many conversations have any of you had with this part of City Hall in regards to possibly amending or changing or just stating your position other than when we're having a hearing? A lot of those conversations are not happening. And so if the administration is not advocating and acting in good faith, then this is going to be a long, dragged out process.
I will be very happy to have that discussion with the council, to be quite honest with you, because we're in a jam. This is a big jam for us. And I'm not sure when you say the capital project, those projects were cut. Are you talking about moving? Because we moved them to the back end.
Yeah, but you're moving them to the back end while moving new projects to the front.
The projects, if there are projects, these are projects that have to do with zoning, rezoning, and as part of the housing. And as you know, housing is a crisis, but we have not yet really funded new things. Because as I said, right now, we're just trying to juggle.
But I'm giving you 2 examples, an example right now of what happened to me. Like, those things are true. This just happened last week. Like, I got 2 different calls, one on a Tuesday, one on a Friday. Hey, great news, you're gonna get 2 new playgrounds. Oh, bad news, you're getting 4 projects that are being, put in the pipeline for a later date. We have no idea of when. And the truth is that we have a responsibility, right? If we're passing and we're funding these projects in good faith, there should be adequate communication coming from. And we have a new mayor. He has his own, idea of what his priorities are. Where he came in at a really rough time. There's not a lot of money, to go around. So some things will be sacrificed in exchange for those priorities that they have laid out to play out. But I'm not willing to do that. I'm not playing that game with, things that really are not meant to be cosmetic. These are programs and services that I have kids at Wagner Playground that are going down a slide that has, broken steel. I mean, these kids are, getting cut. That's why that particular playground was funded. The community center was funded because of the high rates of violence, and the commitment came actually on the day that we were there hosting, an event in honor and recognizing the need for better services, because we had just had a shooting on that corner. And so to me, it's just mind-boggling, the lack of conversation and communication in regards to these things. Again, I'm not saying that I'm not committing to making any changes on the borough-based jail, but I'm saying that you didn't give us that chance, because that conversation was never had. So when it's brought up and said, well, you know what, this is the law that we're gonna abide by, when we know that this administration has been very funky about what they choose and choose not to abide by, to me is just, it's disingenuous, and it gives the impression to the public, right, that the councils are responsible when we haven't had the conversation, because the conversation has never been initiated. Okay, so I'm gonna just move on. I needed to ask that, because I find it really just odd. But in regards to, so we've been having a lot of conversation about the city FEPs and the, I'm really concerned about the PEGs for the asylum seekers. And the reason that I'm concerned is because, when we opened the first HERC, I remember visiting the one on Randall's Island, and, there were beds, but there weren't as many beds. There was a space where people could congregate and, just kind of watch television, make phone calls, play games or whatever. I mean, we have to keep in mind that these are folks that don't have jobs, that don't have, anywhere else to go. If they come out of the tent, people get upset. If they come out into the community, people get upset, but there's nowhere for them to be in the site. And so a lot of sacrifices were made. The storage facilities were eliminated. A lot of the recreational space and activities were all eliminated as part of the PEGs. But the other day we had a hearing, and a gentleman came here, and he had a little cup, and in that cup he had a pack of raisins, and that was breakfast. It was a pack of raisins and yogurt that they received that morning. And we've heard a lot about that, right? The inadequate level of food. So the devil's always in the detail, right? So yes, are we feeding folks? We're feeding them, but what are we feeding them is equally as important to me. And I'm really concerned that any further cuts, like what do those cuts translate into?
Yeah, again, our goal is not to impact those critical services that we provide the asylum seekers. The goal is basically try to bring down the costs in terms of the service model. Try to change the service model to provide less services, and therefore bring down the staff needed to provide those services. And as I said, shifting from for-profit to not-for-profit, these are the strategies that we are trying to use. And more importantly, trying to bring down the census. Because as I said to you, it is critical, okay, that we reduce the asylum census, because the past year and a half, we have over-relied on PEGs, and I know all of you don't like PEGs, okay, to fund the asylum seekers. It's extremely difficult to go back to the agencies right now to ask the agencies, after all these PEGs, we had 6 of them in a row, okay, to do more PEGs to fund the asylum seekers. We have over-relied, and I don't have a stream of funding to do it. So therefore, we have to bring down the census as best as we can, manage down the census, because if that census stay up there, it is not sustainable. You guys are gonna have to give me a new source of funding, okay, to pay for this, because I don't have it.
How many asylum seekers are currently in care now?
64,000, about 800, I believe.
And how many?
It's down. At the peak in January, at the beginning of January, it was at 69,000. Now we're down to 64,800.
And how many folks are in shelter that would be non-asylum seeking shelter, DHS?
I would give you the numbers. DHS, you have DHS numbers here quickly. I would give it to you in a minute, okay?
Because I believe it's significantly higher.
Yeah, it's significant. It's significant. It's over 48-something thousand, I believe.
It was 48 a while ago.
Yeah, it's probably more now. But I'm getting it. I would give it to you in a minute.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because my point is that, the same level of attention to escalating and moving folks out of shelter should be given to DHS shelters, because that census is, significantly higher than it's ever been. And,
Yep.
we have the tools to move those families out of shelter, and we're not necessarily utilizing them. And I know that we've said that we have an inventory issue. We do, I get that, but there have been commitments for move-outs that haven't gone through, because the system that we have in place right now is just so slow that it disincentivizes landlords from being able to hold apartments for too long. And again, we also agree that the census count, right, is important and that it should come down. However, it's how we do that that's important. We saw last week there were 2 incidents where we had, close to 70-something, individuals living in really unsafe situations, and I think that more of that will be encouraged if we're not necessarily doing our due process and ensuring that folks have somewhere to go. And I'm optimistic, because if we're saying, hey, we had X amount of folks, and this number was able to successfully move out, and we know that that's true, then we should continue to do whatever it was that we did. But I'm really concerned that we're not doing that we're not complying with the social services component, enough to make sure that families end up in shelter, and that, as you know, it ends up being costlier at the end, right? Because now we're paying for, services for folks that are unhoused, that are living out on the street, that are living, in basements of churches that are now not able to feed people. So
of comfort, as you know, we added $442 million in the budget for city FIPS. Okay.
that's great.
This is like $300 million more than last year. Again, the challenge we see is
Is it an addition, though? Because usually in the budget, it's underfunded, even.
this is what I said right now in the general plan. Okay, we have $816 million for city vouchers, which is $300 million more than we spent last year. Okay.
That's a good thing.
Okay, it's a combination of rent increases and it's a big increase also in the number of vouchers.
Okay. So we're all aware that the city's shelter system didn't just.
Yeah,
go ahead.
okay. The shelter system right now is about 86,700 folks, 47.
86.
1,047. And that includes asylum and non-asylum. The asylum piece is about like 31,000
Of the 86?
of the 86. So you're talking about 55 is about the normal shelter system.
Yeah, it's pretty significant.
Yeah.
All right, so we spoke about the vouchers. Do we know currently how many individuals are enrolled in and using the rental assistance vouchers
It's about 36,000 households
that are already using it?
that already, yeah.
And how many additional individuals have been deemed eligible?
So about 12,000 currently have vouchers. They have shopping letters, but they are unable to find housing.
Okay. Do you guys keep track of that? Why a person is still, you keep track of whether it's because they couldn't find an apartment, or they found an apartment and there was some sort of delay, an internal delay?
Again, as I said, it's what we know. We have a major housing shortage in New York City, and this is at the end of the day, this is what we have to address. And
I get that, but I want you to listen to me sometimes.
Yeah, okay.
There is a problem with the administration of the processing of the vouchers. I'm not saying that that's 100% of the time, but I'm saying that there is a problem. I personally make, a number of calls just to try to get the process expedited for folks that already have had an apartment and have been waiting for months. So that should be looked at minimum.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I hear you, and we added a lot of staff, okay, to this. Again, as I said, this is something that we've been doing, and in terms of adding resources to DHS, so that DHS could deal with this issue. Right now, we have they have 236 staff currently working.
How much?
236 folks working on the system. And in addition, we have all the providers also currently also work on this as part of the process, because we're trying as best as we can. And that's the reason why we have such a big increase, okay, is because there is a big increase in the number of shelters placement. And so we're making progress. But again, as I said, it's the challenge is on the other side of the ledger, which is housing supply.
Do we have any vacancies?
Yes, we do. It's about 77.
77 vacancies. Are those subject to the PEG The freeze?
No, they could hire, they exempted.
Okay. Still no money for the vouchers, for the extra vouchers?
There's an open litigation, as you know, and I would defer any question to the law department.
I had to try. In the adopted budget, the adopted fiscal year '24 budget included baseline reduction of $36.2 million for DHS shelter service providers. Savings were generated from 2.5% net reduction to shelter provider contract rates. Providers were required to identify 5% in savings of their contracts and were permitted to reinvest half of that, or 2.5%, towards staff retention costs. At that time, DHS stated that many shelter providers were not spending down all of the PS costs allowed in their contracts, and therefore the reduction would not affect providers. Providers, though, have stated that the only reason that they could not spend the entirety of their contract was because of the restrictions placed on what they could spend on funding on. Where is DHS in the process of implementing this change?
There are no necessary steps needed because this is on their spending savings that we're taking. Okay, I mean, there is a misunderstanding which I just want to clarify. Typically, what we do, these agencies, they spend 95%, okay, of their budget, and at the end, we usually take 5% of the savings every year. Okay. This year, we said instead of taking the money on the back end, we're going to take the money on the front end. What we did different is we're saying instead of taking the entire 5%, we're taking half, and we give them half. So I don't see how they could be worse off. You know what I'm saying to you? So we usually take 5% every year, okay, on the back end. Now we're taking on the front end. We only said, you know what, we're going to take that same 5% that we take from you every year because you never manage to spend all your resources. We're going to give you half of it, and we're only taking half. So this is the piece that I just want to clarify. This is a misunderstanding. And then we're also giving them all the flexibility and more latitude, okay, to spend. And they also have the ability, if they could spend above that 97.5%, okay, they could do so.
Okay. Well, we've been hearing from providers that the cut has been quite painful for them.
Again, as I said, this is not a cut. This is on the, usually every year they don't spend 100% of their thing. So they usually spend 95%, and we usually take that 5%. This time, we're giving them half. We're taking half. Okay? So I don't see how could that be a cut.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I would imagine that the fact that, many of our nonprofit groups have had such a hard time even getting paid, those contracts are really slow, and the processing of contracts is a challenge.
That's a challenge, yes.
To sustain services without the capital investment. So we have to do better.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I have two more questions. During the November plan hearing, Director Jiha, you told us that the SNAP program you told the committee that the SNAP program had addressed all the backlogs. Now, I saw this morning that the mayor coincidentally put out,
I told you so.
I know, it's nice to pat ourselves in the back, but it doesn't negate the fact that these applications were taking forever to be processed. And so there's a distinction between, merely going through exhausting the entire list and, making changes to ensure that whatever delays were in place that were getting in the way of folks getting their services have been remediated. And so I'm more concerned about what has been done that is sustainable moving forward to ensure that we're not continuing to see delays in SNAP and cash application processing.
As I said, we have re-engineered the entire process, including getting waivers from the state, invested in technology, provided staff. But we also have to admit we have a challenge.
Yeah.
It is we have a growing number of poor people in this city. And we just added a ton of resources to the cash assistance program.
Yeah.
Okay. And they're growing so fast is because you have a growing number of poor people in the city.
Yeah.
So, and as you get more application, that's one of the things that was driving the backlog. But as I said, we are addressing the backlog, but there's an underlying problem.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
If we were investing in more workforce development, that would help. But can you tell us how many vacancies the agency currently has for its cash assistance and SNAP administration?
I believe we hired, let me see how many people. We had just hired 700, I believe.
70?
700,
Oh, 700.
yeah. And for this process. So that's one of the reasons why we made some significant progress.
Okay. And what special hiring accommodations, if any, is being made to staff up on these areas beyond just for the one-on-one?
As I said, we gave them special treatment, and that's, as I said, we, of all the agencies, the growing number of folks we saw, and that's the reason why them all the resources that they needed to process the applications as quickly as possible. I believe we're in a good place now. I don't expect to have this kind of experience, this kind of backlog again, but I believe they have the appropriate staffing now at this moment.
Yeah, I think
And
we
the
have.
technology and the process change.
That's right. The technology was also important.
We changed our entire process.
Yeah, because when we spoke to the state, I personally reached out to the state to try to get some of those waivers
Yeah.
reinstated. And, one of the concerns that they had was that the number of applications that have been processed and approved during the pandemic was actually higher than when staff came back to the office. And so some of the concerns were that, obviously staffing issues were impacting, but also the system that they were using, which was fairly new, was also a little bit problematic, a bit problematic.
Yep.
Okay, and my final question is regarding the syringe buyback program. Local Law 2022 124 would require DOHMH to establish a needle syringe and sharp buyback program in 5 high-need council districts. DOHMH would determine eligibility for participation as well as the buyback incentive for up to 20 cents per needle and a cap of $10 a day. What is the current status of the buyback program?
I believe they identified a provider,
Okay.
and they're working with that provider. But as you know, this is a very painful. It was a very painful process because they couldn't find a provider to provide the services. So they're in the process of working with the providers, and very soon they would roll out the program.
Okay, I wasn't aware there was an issue with the provider. I thought
Yeah,
that it was
they had an
a
issue.
funding issue. Okay.
They had an issue. They had an issue with the provider.
Has there been any? Okay, so the pilot that was a question
pilot
of
has not
started. Do you have any idea of when we can anticipate that the pilot will begin?
I would have to get back to DOHMH and find out exactly.
But the funding has been identified.
We will work with you and as we go forward in terms of
It was
funding.
$2 million. It's not a lot of money. Okay, and do you anticipate any eligibility criteria to change?
At this point in time, no.
No. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Director, I just want to get a bit of clarity on one thing I forgot to ask. I have a note here. The 700 hires that have been made, since when? When did those hires, from when to when?
I believe in the last David. January? Since January.
I'm sorry, January 2023.
2023.
Since January 2023. And those are all in the HRA benefits processing unit? Okay. Thank you. Now we have questions from council members Powers, followed by Brooks Powers.
Thank you. Thanks. Nice to see you guys, and thanks for your testimony. I'll just jump into a few questions quick. You mentioned that we have $49 million that we've received from the federal government, and another, sounds like 100 plus that we're still waiting for. I think all of us agree far too few dollars coming from the federal government, and we are all, I think, disappointed with that reaction to this crisis. However, sounds like paperwork and requirements that we, or perhaps the federal government is making too stringent for us or we can't fulfill. Could you just give us more specificity on exactly what we're talking about that's locking up that $100 million? Because obviously that money could go to good use right now.
Yeah, every other municipality is having the same challenge. For instance, they require that we provide the alien numbers, things that we did not collect initially. Only $12 could go toward, or $12.50, I believe, can go toward paying for hotel. I mean, things that it's a number of challenges at every other municipality. I believe the city comptroller last month and the OMB director for Chicago, they sent a letter complaining about it. We're all trying to. We're gathering all the information that we need, because there's a lot of information that they requested, and information that we did not collect before, okay, that we have to collect in order for us to get access to those resources. But again, we're trying our best. We're going to try. We're going to go after our best. I mean, sometimes very soon to submit the application to get the resources. But it's been very, very, very challenging.
Based on that information that you haven't, that we haven't collected, it sounds like other jurisdictions haven't collected either. Do we have a belief that we're going to receive that funding, and what do you think an expected timeline is?
We believe we will get it. I don't know, because as I said, we just process of gathering all the information that we needed. And once we submit the application, I don't know how long it's going to take them on their end to give us those resources.
And what was able to get us the $49 million?
It was a different type of program.
Okay.
Where they advance us the resources upfront rather than us submitted all these other paperwork that we need to do to claim.
Okay. Because I have 30 seconds here, I want to ask two more questions. One is the subway safety plan, which I believe the administration recently announced that they'll be extending shifts in the subway to address recent uptick. In the last version of this with the governor, the state had also provided funding for that to reimburse, at least for overtime costs. Can you provide us an update on that? And second is the governor's executive budget included a proposal to allow local governments to execute padlock orders on unlicensed businesses through the Office of Cannabis Management. If that was to pass and the city council took action, in the enacted budget, after the enacted budget, will we be doing anything to increase investments to shut down those unlicensed businesses, or adding anything into enforcement as part of this budget or in the future?
Yes. The plan is to go back to about 5,000 hours of overtime. From the currently we have 3,000 hours of overtime. That's what the deployment supposed to be. Ultimately, the goal is to get to, because we've been working with the state to see if we could get 10,000 hours of overtime, okay, being added to this plan. Last time, the state covers it about 3.5 months for about $62 million. We're working with them to see, because we're trying to get that expansion to be done through the end of to the end of this year. Okay, so I don't know where we're going to end with the state, but that's part of a negotiation. We're talking to them to see if we will get to the 10,000, because that's what they truly believe that we really need. But what they announced last week was just an expansion of like 55,000 hours, which was like, compromise things from their perspective, but what they truly need is about 10,000 hours. Regarding the cannabis, we definitely will make an assessment, okay? And as we go through this, and as I said, the mayor wants to have the authority, okay, to jail, to manage, to close down these shops. And once we do the assessment, if we get the authority, we would provide work with the council and provide the appropriate funding, okay, to make sure that we have the necessary enforcement.
And I'll just end on this. Do you have any sense of what that investment would look like in order to do proper enforcement?
Again, we're waiting to find out exactly what kind of delegation of authority. What does it mean? That's what we need a lot more before we could give you an assessment of how much that would cost us.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, the chair.
Okay, we've also been joined by Council Members Lee, Ressler, Nurse, Abreu, and Council Member Wan on Zoom. Now we have questions from Council Member Brooks Powers.
Thank you. Wanting to first start off with the streets plan. In the latest streets plan update from DOT, the agency wrote, quote unquote, given fiscal challenges that hit New York City in 2023, serious actions were taken citywide, including a hiring freeze and a 5% program to eliminate the gap in multiple financial plans. New York City DOT did our best to protect services, but unfortunately, many programs, including supporting the streets plan, had to be reduced. DOT fell well short of streets plan's legal mandates, particularly with respect to investments in bus infrastructure. Considering that the Department of Transportation has not met its mandated targets in the streets plan, does OMB believe that the current level of funding for DOT is sufficient? And does the administration plan to make further investments in DOT in the executive budget?
DOT made significant progress toward the street plan goals in 2023. They have met the goal of installing 1 million square feet of new pedestrian space. They exceeded their goal for redesign intersections and accessible pedestrian signals. They also continue to make progress with installing more protected bike lane and improving bus transit. But as you know, they face some serious challenges in meeting the streets plan goals, such as they have a challenge with the facility constraints, supply chain issues, and to some extent, opposition from the community.
Just staying on this topic for a moment, because again, by DOT's own admission, the PEG and the hiring freeze played a role in that. So to my question, do you feel that the funding level is sufficient?
We believe so.
So the budget level right now, DOT, in your summation, should be able to achieve the goal set forth in the streets plan law?
Yes.
Next, DOT capital plan. The DOT's capital program and the preliminary capital commitment plan has decreased from the adopted capital commitment plan across many key transportation project areas over the plan period. This includes a $655.9 million reduction in capital projects for the city's bridges, $949.6 million reduction for highway projects, and a $153.6 million reduction in capital projects related to traffic. Can OMB explain why this funding was rolled out of the plan period? And do you believe that the capital needs for these critical infrastructure areas are currently underfunded in the preliminary capital commitment plan?
Again, this has to do with the city debt capacity. As I indicated to you before, this is a real challenge. We are very close to our debt limit, and as a result, we had to roll back many of the projects to the out years of the financial plan, of the capital plan, because we couldn't fund them. So again, this is the same issue. We're working with the state to secure the expansion of the TFA. The governor included $12 billion in their budget to deal with this issue. But again, this is the same issue like we discussed before, the challenge of the capital debt limit. If we do not move resources that we currently have allocated for the borough-based jail that we know we're not spending because the timeline is not real, okay, we would not have resources to fund critical projects.
And one last question, I just want to touch on the subway overtime. So the council has found that the administration consistently underestimates the cost of overtime for the city's uniform workforce, which has been under budgeted at adoption repeatedly in recent years. And I know in response to Councilmember Powers a moment ago, you said that we truly need at least 10,000 hours of subway overtime. So from your perspective, how is the administration assessing the need, and how is OMB weighing the cost of the increase against actual results? And I just want to understand, how are we looking to plug the gap to meet the need in light of the administration's priority as it pertains to the overtime, but yet the state's not including it in the budget so far in terms of the reimbursement aspect of it?
We, as you know, we have given targets, overtime targets, to all the uniform agencies as part of the measures that we took to manage expenses during the crisis. But for some agencies, it's a lot easier than others, particularly for NYPD with the demonstrations we have since October 7th, and they have to redeploy force. You have issue with crime in the subway system, so therefore they have to respond to those things. So for certain agencies, it's extremely difficult, okay, to manage on a day-to-day basis because we don't know what's going to transpire. So we are managing them as best as we can, okay, and if needed, we will make the appropriate adjustment to the budget, okay, in future plans to reflect what we're seeing taking place down in the streets.
Mr. Jihad, how does this budget ensure we are making the requisite investments to complete capital projects on time? For example, does DDC have what it needs to keep projects on tracks, and are agencies equipped with the resources to coordinate effectively on capital projects in the coming years? And I use the Far Rockaway Library as an example of that.
Yeah, DDC has, from our perspective, all the resources that they need to do their work. They were exempted as part of the freeze, okay, from the freeze, so that they could, have all the resources that they need because they are funded through IFAs, and also they met their plan their entire targets, okay, with the first PEG they submitted. So therefore, we removed them, okay, from the freeze from the get-go. So from our perspective, they have all the resources that they need.
Thank you.
We have questions from Councilmember Farias, followed by Rivera.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. I'd like to ask some questions around the adult literacy program. In 2023, DYCD rolled out a concept paper for adult literacy. Earlier this year, the agency released an RFP for fiscal year 2025 through fiscal year 2027. This RFP will allocate funding based on neighborhood tabulation areas, better known as NTAs. Only programs physically located in one or more of the 41 designated NTAs will be eligible to apply for contracts. DYCD's budget for adult literacy has decreased by 50% from $43.4 million in the fiscal year of 2024 adopted budget to $21.7 million in fiscal year 2025 prelim. What was the rationale behind these reductions?
There was no reduction. It's basically, as you know, City Council and the mayor, as we get closer to adoption, add like one-time discretionary funding, and the discretionary funding are just for 1 year. Okay, it's not baseline. Okay, that's the only thing that is missing.
Okay, so it was a one-shot.
That's a one shot.
Only, and any rationale behind not wanting to keep it at that amount versus?
We will see as we get closer to adoption, and see what can be done.
Great, thank you. And then considering the growing number of asylum seekers, how are adult literacy providers expected to meet the needs of this population, especially with the variety of languages that we're now having to manage?
I believe DYCD currently offers adult literacy at Herx currently, and also this program is also open to all New Yorkers, but they're currently providing services at the Herx.
Okay, can OMB commit to revising the RFP with DYCD and restore the 21 million reduction that we're considering for adoption?
DYCD, I believe, they issue an addendum to indicating to providers they can also apply to the NTA that is closest to the proposed location now. And they extended the deadline to the RFP to March 31st as per the council request.
And under the DYCD's new NTAs, there will be 17 council districts that will lack adult literacy programs. Can OMB commit to revising this neighborhood breakdown?
As stated before, at this time and under current conditions, I cannot make any commitment. However, if the economy continues to improve and when we have the resources, as we get closer to adoption, we will discuss priorities of the council and the administration and see what can be funded.
Thank you. I mean, we will definitely like to look at least where the highest needs are, especially where in our migrants,
Of course.
situation, we're addressing the larger populations. Then just really quickly on migrant jobs, on the Migrants Jobs Bank, Governor Hochul's executive budget includes the creation of a migrant job bank for immigrants eligible to work. This includes over 18,000 open positions from nearly 400 companies. 75% of these open positions would be in the city, with 24% in the food and hospitality industry. How will this program be implemented in the city, and how will the migrants be prepared for these jobs?
I believe we were currently working with the state, and I cannot give you at this moment in time, what the are things working out between the state and the city, but we'll probably come back to you with an answer.
Sure. I mean, with the consistent conversations that you folks are having with Governor Hochul's office, I would assume you'd have some idea. And I mean, we're hoping that community-based programs will be involved in this initiative as we move forward. I won't ask the last two questions since you're saying you're in conversations. We will definitely follow up on it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Councilmember Rivera, followed by Brewer.
I want to thank the chair and, of course, the speaker for their remarks and work to support cultural institutions and libraries. And I want to thank the panel for being here and answering all our questions. The Department of Cultural Affairs PEGS totals $11.6 million in fiscal year 2024 and $7.6 million in 25. The fiscal 25 preliminary plan includes a reduction of $4.2 million in 24, 2.2 in 25, and $2.1 million in the out years for Cultural Development Fund recipients. Can you explain the decision-making process? Why is the administration implementing PEGS on an agency which distributes 95% of its funding to nonprofit organizations? And with that late announcement over 6 months into the fiscal year, what changes will you make so these unacceptable delays don't happen again?
As I said before, we value the work that the cultural institutions do in the city. And it's not by accident that they were exempted from the 4 PEGs, that this administration did the first 2 years. So it's because we value what they do, and we see the importance of what they do for the city. However, the size of the budget gap that we had to deal with requires that an all hands on deck approach in terms of asking everyone, every agency, to make a contribution. That's the reason why they were pegged. And as I stated before, if economic conditions improve and we have resources, when we get more than we anticipated currently, we will work with the council, in terms of identifying, reviewing joint priorities, that can be partially or fully funded. restored.
Well, I would say that they were exempted because the council fought very hard for those restorations as well. And if you're looking at, the economic outlook and should things improve, as you've mentioned quite a few times, let's talk about cultural institutions and groups. I mean, they're a huge revenue driver. This is $22 billion in economic activity with an ecosystem that includes small businesses and major tourism. So the preliminary plan includes $7.4 million in '24, $5.4 million in fiscal year '25, and $5.5 million in the out years for the SIGs. DCLA funds a portion of the operating costs for the 34 city-owned institutions. Can you explain to us how the PEGs were calculated and implemented for the SIGs in both November and January plans? Is council discretionary funding impacted by these PEGs? Were individual member item funding and citywide initiatives part of the operating budget? And is the percentage of cuts the same for all 34 SIGs in the November and January plan? And just if I could add to that, the libraries, since the administration announced the cancellation of the fiscal year 2025 executive budget program to eliminate the gap for city agencies due to continued strong fiscal management, are there plans to restore the November plan baseline cut to the library's budget of $23.6 million in '24 and $22 million in the out years so the systems can bring back the much-needed Sunday services?
Let's start with the first question.
Thank you.
For the November plan, DCLA applied a 3.5% cut across the board to all SIG for fiscal year '24. But tiered the cut in fiscal year '25 and out. It's like 7.4% for large SIG with a budget of $20 million or more, and 3.5% for the small ones. For the general plan, the DCLA also tiered the cuts in fiscal year '24. It's 11.3% for large SIG and 3.5% for small SIGs, and an 8.3% across the board to all SIG for fiscal year '25 and out. Regarding the council discretionary funding, they are not impacted by the PEG. And as I stated earlier, if financial conditions improve beyond what we currently anticipate, okay, we will work with the council to identify joint priorities that can be fully or partially restored, including the libraries, including the cultural institutions. Again, as I said, we have to make sure, okay, we have the resources to basically start this conversation, start the conversation about restoring. Until we do, I cannot commit at this point in time, okay, that we're going to restore X, Y, and Z or Z. Okay, if resources are there, as we get closer to adoption, we will discuss with the council and identify joint priorities that can be fully or partially restored.
Well, thank you for that. I would say, as I mentioned, major drive to city revenue. I hope that's analyzed when cuts are made. And as you can imagine, these smaller institutions and groups and the libraries, they're critical to just our survival here in the city.
Sure.
So thank you for the time to the chair and to my colleagues for their questions as well. I just want to add that, cutting these really could have negative effects on our local economies, and I know all of my colleagues feel that way. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Brewer, followed by Hudson.
Thank you very much. I do want to thank James Bristow for his support in answering questions before I go further. So I am concerned about the asylum seeker contracts. The administration has entered into a one-year, no-bid, $53 million emergency contract with MoCaFi. It is a for-profit financial services company. It is MWBE. The contract will provide asylum seekers with EBT cards for the purchase of food and baby supplies, as you know. Administration has indicated that this will replace food services provided under a previous no-bid contract with DOCO, another for-profit company. It's a little strange to me to have this new no-bid contract because, as you said in your introduction, and as we have been told, we are going to go with more nonprofits. So when did the new food EBT card program begin? How many cards will be issued, and how many families are expected to receive this benefit? I had understood a pilot of 500. We wanted to know the criteria to select the families. I understand originally from some media reports that they were in what I would call scatter site, meaning, 2 hotel rooms here, 2 hotel rooms there. But I also saw that they are also going to be in an entire shelter. So could you explain that to me? And also, got to stop this no bid contracts. We sat here during oversight and investigation stating from health and hospitals we're going to do RFPs, and we're not doing them. Thank you.
Yeah, this is a program that is, it's a pilot program that will serve 500 households. The goal of the program basically is to save money, okay?
But why no bid?
I'm going to get there. The goal of the program is to save money. We expect to save about $7 million out of this program because we had a lot of waste in terms of food that was served to the asylum seekers. And the second goal is to make sure that some of the resources that is being spent on the migrant stays in the local economy, because these will be used at local supermarket and bodegas. And thirdly is because of we trying to basically do as best as we can to create opportunities for MWBEs as part of the resources that have been spent as part of this huge amount of money that the city is spending. So the program has not yet launched. It's expected to start in the next several weeks. The program is, as I said, is expected to start with 500 folks. And as we move forward, if the pilot is successful, okay, that will be launched to the entire city. I don't have to repeat what the mayor already made it clear, that he wanted to make sure that he create opportunities for MWBEs, and he's the one who referred to that the vendor, okay, to HPD. So this is news. This is not news. This is everybody already knows. He made it clear that's what he did.
Okay, I mean, to me, I do support MWBE, but it seems to me you should do a bid. Maybe there are other MWBEs, number one. Number two, do a bid that says we will give points, as we do for housing, for veterans and city employees, to MWBE. If we have a policy of doing bids and not doing for-profits, we should continue it. That's exactly what you said in your opening, but here's a major contract that is not that. Okay, second, does a $53 million maximum contract value include the funding that will be added to EBT cards, or is it solely relating to the fees paid to Mo-Cal fee?
The 50, like I said, the resources, the money is basically for everything.
For the company?
It's for everything. It is. You include all costs, the cost of the fund that will be added to the cards for the asylum seekers, the issuance card, disbursement fees. It includes everything.
Okay, can you break down either now or in the future what's for the fees and what's for the asylum seekers on the card?
We could provide you a breakdown if you want,
okay,
of every single one of them.
Okay, and how long is the pilot?
I would get back to you on this. I don't know exactly. I think how long is going to be.
Now, how does this impact the .go, the for-profit non-bid also? How does it impact?
What do you mean? Because it's basically it's going to replace, that's what we're trying to do here. It's going to try to replace the services that were, if it's successful and we decided to launch it, okay, the goal is to basically replace.
How long is a no-bid .go contract?
They just responded to an RFP again. As I said, they have a contract with H&H, and when the contract expires...
Well, when does it expire, .go?
I don't have it in front of me. I would get back to you on that.
Okay. I'm just saying, we got to stop no bids.
I fully agree with you.
I know, but we're
This is-
doing it again and again and again.
This is the direction, as I said, we're moving, because that's how we see we're going to find ways to save resources, save money.
DOI investigators, I'm very supportive of the DOI. I think that this investigation department, as you know, provides necessary oversight to ensure that agencies are functioning properly. It seems that oversight isn't a priority fund by this administration in some cases. And this is also, I want to make sure that Department of Correction also has a Board of Correction fully funded. Both of these agencies need to be fully funded. So why hasn't the administration prioritized funding oversight agencies with adequate staff and salaries? And do you plan to restore cuts and improve new needs for DOI in the executive plan? And the reason I understand is we are always told that if the agency is fully staffed, then they can get more money to meet their new needs. Let me tell you the problem. You can never be fully staffed. Gail Brewer leaves to go for another job in the middle of whatever. It's not necessarily easy to hire another attorney because all the reasons that you know. Fully staffed is not the right word. What is the right word, in my opinion, is making sure these agencies can do oversight. So how do you answer my question? Thank you.
DOI is our eyes and ears on the ground, and as a result, we have made significant investment to DOI. In the last 2 years, we have provided them with significant resources to monitor the BBJ's program, to monitor the asylum seeker spending that we're doing. Okay, and I've had many discussions with the agency head, the commissioner, okay, in terms of her needs, okay. However, given the challenges that we're dealing with, we ask all agencies to contribute savings, but we have been working with DOI to provide them the resources that they need, either to promote folks or to hire people, okay. And then, as I said, more importantly, we provided them resources, okay, for 2 major projects, because I believe we need eyes on the ground to ensure that the Bobage spending and the asylum seeker spending is properly monitored.
Okay, I believe they need more. We should have further discussions. They're not fully funded for the regular work that they do. I know what the 2 projects are. We appreciate that. How about the Board of Correction? They are not fully funded.
The Board of Correction?
Board of Correction, right. Oversight, another oversight agency.
We, again, as I said, I believe we have given them the funding that's necessary for them to conduct their operations. As I said, it's a question of different people have different ways of looking at resources. From our perspective, they have all the resources that they need to meet their mandates.
Okay, one other quick question and I'm done.
And we'll continue to work with them, and then we will do an assessment of their needs. If there are needs going forward, we will address them.
Okay. When you do the 60-day and 30-day, and you have to go back to the Roosevelt Hotel, I go with family, so I know. Then they go back to hopefully another hotel in Manhattan if they have children in the system, and I want to thank H&H for all their support. What's the cost, not necessarily now, of all of that transition? In other words, somebody has to re-enter a family into the system. I don't know how many families have been re-entered. I'd like to know that cost. Obviously, maybe you don't have it today. To compare it with, we're trying to get the per diem down. I just don't believe that all of this change is necessary in terms of cost. There are maybe other ways to get people to move, and I understand getting the census down. I got it. But this churning, to me, is expensive, and I'd love to get that breakdown.
I will work with your staff, and we will work with our staff to see if we have that information, and if we don't, and whether we could create that analysis to provide it to you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Councilmember Hudson, followed by Joseph.
Thank you so much, Chair. Back in November, Director Jiha, I asked if you use population data to inform fiscal policy, and you stated, I quote, "Of course, yes, we do." In that same exchange, you said that you were aware that the older adult population in New York City will increase 40% by the year 2040. Despite that, however, the November plan included a $13.5 million peg for older adult centers in fiscal year 2027, and the preliminary plan includes an additional peg for older adult centers of $18.9 million this fiscal year and $2.2 million in fiscal years 2025 through 2028. Older adult centers are a vital resource for many of our city's older residents, and as the city's population of older adults continues to expand exponentially, the need for these centers becomes so much more important. How are these PEG amounts determined, and how does the agency plan to achieve these savings?
As you know, like you properly stated, as I said to you, we agree with you, and we said to you we would never leave any elderly folks go hungry in New York City. We will try our best not to have that happen in New York City on our watch. And as you know, as part of the review process, we reduce the PEG for an aging by about 87%. Okay, so as I said, we try to, as best as we can, when the agency submit their target, we review them, and if we realize they don't have the means, okay, to absorb the PEG, okay, we either fully remove them, exempt them from the PEG, or give them a partial exemption. In this case, we give them a partial exemption, which is a big piece. We reduce their PEG target by 87%.
How will older adult center capacity be impacted by this funding reduction?
No current service were reduced by this saving initiative.
Will this reduction impact future RFPs? If so, how?
Discussions around the new RFP are ongoing, and right now no final decision have been made about them.
And when will the next RFP for older adult centers be released? What impact will this funding reduction have on parameters or scope of services in the next RFP?
Don't know. I would have to talk to the agency to know exactly when the new RFP would be released.
Is that something you can follow up with us
I would follow
on?
up with you.
Is the administration considering restoring the PEGs in the executive plan?
As I said, at this point in time, I cannot make any commitment, but if financial conditions improved, we will work with the council to see what can be partially or fully restored.
Okay, and in the most recent PMMR, it was indicated that there was a pause on the intake of new case management clients due to budgetary constraints. This program assists older adults in getting connected to needed services and resources. How is OMB working with NYC Aging to address this budget issue and ensure there are no further pauses going forward?
We will continue to work with the agency. As I said, this case management with these terms is part of the terms and conditions. This is a report we regularly distributed to the council, and we will work with the agency to see what can be done.
Does the administration plan on increasing funding for case management? And if so, by how much, and when will this funding be added?
I believe the case management currently is adequately funded, but again, we are constantly in communication with the agency, and if there is a need going forward, we will do an assessment.
Is there a specific reason why you believe it's adequately funded currently?
Yes, we believe currently where they are adequately funded, because they have not come back to us and complained about lack of funding.
Are you aware of any wait lists for case management?
Yes, I'm aware of the wait list. As I said, we work with them, but as I said to you before, they know the challenges that we're dealing with financially, and given the challenges that we're dealing with, we have done, we have gone above and beyond to try to accommodate them as best as we can. So when I said they're adequately funding, I'm talking about in relation to the challenges that we're dealing with.
Okay, because I would argue that as long as there's a wait list for any type of service, that obviously the funding is inadequate.
Given the challenges that we're dealing with, we have gone above and beyond to try to accommodate them.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, we have Councilmember Joseph, followed by Narcisse.
Thank you, Chair. In November, Plan OMB swapped $60 million of city funds for federal funds for school food. While we were told there were no impact to school food budgets or operation, we're hearing that there are indeed cuts made to school food menus, that high-demand items are being swapped with heat and serve options. Are there any stipulations surrounding the federal funds that would make certain food menu items ineligible for reimbursement? If so, what food would be omitted as a result?
Okay. again, trying to clarify, there was no cut of city tax dollars. Basically, what we did, we swapped. Okay.
That's not what we're hearing
No,
from
I
schools
understand.
and children.
No, let me finish. We swapped, but bear in mind, the city made some significant investment in a school cafeteria. So what we end up with, you have a lot of children hanging out in the cafeterias now and eating more and more and more and more. So therefore, what they did was, hey, they basically cut some of the items from the menu.
So you heard the word cut.
Yeah, they cut because more kids are eating, okay, not because there was a cut to the budget itself.
There
So
it
what we're doing right now, we're modifying their budget and adding federal resources for them.
That's not what we got from the schools and the students and all the news reports, even the cooks in the kitchen.
could
And
show us-
council is part of the
You could show-
cafeteria
you could show
enhancement
us-
as well.
You could show us what I'm saying to you. Okay, we're modifying the budget to add federal resources. This is not even city dollars. Okay, we're talking about federal tax dollars. So we're modifying the budget.
You modify the budget. When would we see that in the budget?
We'll see it. We already made the modification, so you will see it going forward. Okay.
Is there a timeline when we can
We
expect?
already did it. We already did
Okay,
it.
so if we go and look now, it's already been adjusted.
It's already did. Yes.
Okay. If schools cannot maintain the same food item they were able to prior to this swap of federal dollars, can the DOE ask city funds to be reinstated for that same program?
There is nothing for city tax dollars because, as I said, we will get reimbursed from USDA for this. So there is no need to add city tax dollars. You know, we already added the federal tax dollars for this.
You said it was a swap, and
Yes.
we will see
We already
it.
added more.
So when we reach out to superintendents and schools, we should be able to see that.
You
Okay.
should be able to see that.
We're going to talk about my favorite subject, class size.
Oh, boy.
There's currently 4.1 billion capital budget for new capacity class size compliance with the SCA's new fiscal 25-29 capital plan. SCA has stated that it's not enough funding to comply with the state class size law. The city required to be fully compliant with the law by 2027 to 2028. This year, does OMB intend to authorize increasing funds for SCA in the next amendment to the plan?
Yeah, as I said to you again before, this is a challenge with debt capacity. Debt capacity is a real challenge. And as a result, we could only accommodate $8 trillion of new capital in the plan for SCA, because as I said, we have SCA, we have the Borough-based jail, we have the BQE. All these things have to be accommodated within the constraints that we have, which is a very small amount of debt capacity left. So that's the reason why we've been working with the state to get an expansion of the TFA. And we welcome your advocacy in Albany to work with us to basically lobby the state to give us the expansion that we're asking them, which is $19 billion. But instead, we're only getting 12.
So so the additional funds you needed is $19 billion. What about educators? So DOE will need to add thousands of teachers to comply with this law. DOE's estimate for the new numbers is 9,000. Is OMB working with DOE to add an additional budget for headcount in 2025 and the out years?
We are currently in compliance, and we'll continue to discuss our needs as we proceed. But again, it's a challenge. It's 9,000 teachers, like you said. Finding 9,000 teachers is not going to be easy. So again, we will continue work with you and work with DOE and try to, as best as we can, try to accommodate the needs going forward, but it's going to be very challenging.
But historically, we've always had shortage areas, all those areas looking to be filled historically. Two decades in the classroom, we still had shortage areas.
So can you imagine finding out an additional 9,000?
Well, you need to fill in the ones that you cannot get. Well, last time you were here, we talked about the Accenture report, right?
Mm-hmm.
You said you would get it to me. As of now, the council still does not have it, but there's a 14% cut to the early childhood budget between November and preliminary budget. OMB and DOE have both used seat vacancies as the reason for the cut. The council believed these seats can be placed more efficiently over a year ago. The city contracted Accenture to provide a report. We still don't have the report, but yet there's a cut to early childhood at $170 million when that data was supposed to give you the information in order to make that decision.
Tanya, you want to take this one?
Good afternoon. So we have a preliminary assessment from Accenture, and we're working on the final report. But in the meantime, we work with the council to put in the $15 million for extended day seats. And New York City Public Schools reached out to vendors and asked what their capacity was. So we weren't waiting for a final determination on what the needs are, because we know that there are empty seats, and we're trying to put the need with the demand with the availability. And so we are still trying to get those final numbers, but in the meantime, we are asking where capacity is so that we can put students in those seats. There's still a lot of empty seats.
So we need to move, so you're gonna need that data. But when I met with New York City Public Schools, they said it was an add-on to already existing program. That wasn't the mission and the goal of the New York City Council when we piloted this program. It was to be unique. We could gather data in order for us to make decisions. See, data drives your instruction. Data is supposed to also drive your policy. We don't have data here in order for you your policy. We don't have data here in order for you.
The council, we're working with New York City Public Schools to get that final information, and over the next several weeks, then we'll have the conversations with that data in hand to see where the needs are.
And you're going to provide zip code and area code. And my final question, sorry, Chair, federal fiscal cliff is coming up. What is OMB? How is OMB working with New York City Public Schools to fill in those gaps?
Yeah, this is something that we're in process of. We're doing a review because, as you know, the funding expires at the end of this year. So we're in the process of reviewing every single one of these programs to see what's critical and
all of them are critical.
And how we're going to fund them. Because as you can imagine, we just funded the DOE portion of the summarizing that was funded with federal stimulus, but because it expires, we couldn't go forward with that program, but we just made a decision to replace the federal funds with city tax levy. So we'll go through the same process, okay, with all the other programs to see what can be done for each one of them.
Thank you, Chair.
Councilmember Narcisse, followed by Schulman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Chair. Jusqu'avant de commencer, j'aimerais te dire merci. On a fait des bonnes choses ici, malgré les temps difficiles.
Merci beaucoup, madame.
Okay. Tu es mon histoire. H&H current budget for asylum seeker is $1.8 billion in fiscal 2025, which make up nearly 60% of H&H budget. In the November plan, an additional $2.6 billion was added in fiscal 2025 for asylum seeker services. However, in the preliminary plan, H&H received a peg of over $1 billion in fiscal 2025. What is the reason for H&H having such a large budget for asylum seekers?
As you know, we couldn't, when the city faced a challenge of the asylum seeker crisis, we didn't have the capacity to manage this crisis. The only place that has this kind of close to that kind of expertise was H&H. So therefore, we had to rely on H&H. And by relying on H&H, we had to provide them the resources, those kind of resources, basically to manage for the city the asylum seeker crisis.
When the $2.6 billion was added to H&H budget in November, did you anticipate reducing it by $1 billion 2 months later?
No, we didn't know that, but as I said, we had to find the savings, and this is as part of finding the savings, and it means we're going to have to bring down H&H budget.
How is the preliminary PEG amount determined?
We start with the 20% as a part of something that we need, because this is what we needed to basically, and the question is whether or not there was room for them to achieve that kind of savings. After our own assessment, we realized they have the room if we do what we said we're trying to do, which is to rebid contracts, manage down services, and reduce staffing. We realized we could achieve that 20% goal. That's how we set that 20% goal.
Do you anticipate any additional pegs to asylum seeker services under H&H?
Yes, as we indicated as part of the letter that we sent to agencies last month, we anticipate another 10% peg for the asylum seeker budget.
Okay. Distress Hospital Fund, that's my line. The state created the Distress Hospital Fund to support safety net hospitals that disproportionately treat Medicaid patients and populations. H&H is not statutorily excluded from receiving funding due to their work with Medicaid populations. But funding is also pursuant to criteria determined by the State Commissioner of Health and subject to approval of the State Budget Director. As a result, based on determination made by the state, H&H has not received any distress hospital funding. Did the state provide a specific reason for why H&H hospitals are excluded?
No, they did not. We do not believe that the city should have his sales tax intercepted without any say from the city. We continue to advocate to the state to remove the intercept. As you know, the intercept's costing the city $150 million a year, and none of that money is going to any one of the city hospitals.
Wow.
So it's a challenge, but we continue to work with the state to make sure that every time we think that's going to expire, it's going to sunset, they find another way of intercepting that $150 million of our resources without anything from us, without saying anything to us.
Since my time is going, but part of the city's sales tax is captured by the state to fund this fund. How much city funding taking annually for the Distress Hospital Fund? And second, how much funding would H&H Hospital receive if they met the criteria?
It's, as I said, it's about $150 million
150
a year, and they have not given us any indication that they would basically provide resources to H&H. We have been advocating on behalf of H&H for the longest, but H&H has not received a penny from that $150 million that they took from the city.
So even if they met the criteria? So thank you for your time. Thank you, Chair. And don't forget sickle cell bill. If you want to add anything. Yes, you done?
I'm sorry?
Did you answer the question? How much funding would H&H Hospital receive if they met the criteria? 1/5?
No, they have not included H&H at all.
At all?
At all. They took $150 million from the city.
Okay.
But they have not included H&H as part of any distress hospital.
And don't forget the sickle cell bill. It needs to be funded too. Thank you.
Councilmember Schulman, followed by Dinowitz.
Thank you. I want to thank the Speaker and the Chair for today's important hearing, and thank you, Dr. Jaha, for being here and answering all of our questions today. So DOH-MH's headcount was reduced by 18 positions in the preliminary plan on top of a reduction of 29 positions in the November plan for fiscal 2025, resulting from PEGs. Overall, the department's fiscal 2025 budgeted headcount is 6% less than its current fiscal 2024 budgeted headcount. The department's headcount within the disease prevention and treatment program area for fiscal 2025 is 217 less than it currently is in fiscal 2024, a 17% difference. So I have 3 questions. One is, was this headcount reduction proposed by DOH-MH? What discussions have you held with DOH-MH over the past 6 months to ensure that there won't be an impact on the city's disease prevention and treatment, and do you anticipate any additional headcount reductions? And I just want to say that the disease and prevention is the heart of the mayor's program, Healthy NYC, which was codified by legislation that I introduced and was passed unanimously by the City Council recently. Thank you.
Yeah, these the PEGs, basically, these were long vacant positions, and that we discussed with DOH-MH, and that's what they submitted to us, because these are vacant positions that they could not fill for the longest. So these are the positions they submitted. With respect to the other needs, as I said, I believe they are appropriately funded, but as we go forward, if there is a need, because we always exempted this from the, because this is critical public health, They always have the authority to hire, but if there is an increased need based on our own assessment, when we discuss with them, with the agencies, we will address them in coming plans.
Okay, thank you. That was my question.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take a 10-minute break, and we'll resume with Councilmember Dinowitz, followed by Krishna.
Thank you.
They definitely saw this question. We asked them specifically about the interchange. And we didn't do anything differently? No, they never sent any edits. No. Yeah, they're saying that. I don't know if press saw it. Oh, Kathleen, hey, good to see you. James Bristow. Yes. Good to see you really in person. I know, yeah, that's right. Y'all were at that table, and then, yeah. I know, well, it'll be a different world. Sorry, give me, okay, yeah, I'll come walk right around. Okay.
Okay, we're going to get started again. Councilmember Dinowitz, followed by Councilmember Krishna.
CUNY. CUNY's what page? 64.
It's still the morning. Good afternoon. How are you doing?
Okay.
I'm a little jealous. You have a giant binder there with all of the answers and all of the potential questions we'll ever ask. So turn to the CUNY page, please.
Oh,
Take that. The section, right? Well, given how much to cut the budget, it may just be one little tiny page. We'll see. I'm half kidding. I'm not. But the fiscal 2025 budget is $189 million less than the fiscal 2024 budget adoption. $189 is a significant cut just to basic operating expenses, not to mention programs that we've discussed at length at these hearings and other hearings, like Reconnect, ACE, and ASAP. Student enrollment can be impacted. All of the operations of CUNY can be impacted. So how does the administration plan to support students currently enrolled at CUNY and future students enrolling in CUNY with cuts as drastic as these?
Listen, I continue to work, as I said, with CUNY and the council to address the challenges that CUNY and the city face at the same time. Okay. We will, whether it's Reconnect or ACE, okay, these were both funded 1 year at a time, okay? And as I told the speaker last year, Reconnect has been a very successful program. This is something as we proceed, as we move forward, we will work with the council, okay, and see exactly what we're going to do going forward with these two programs. But with respect to CUNY in general, okay, the changes, we were very careful in terms of where we found the resources from CUNY's budget. And if you talk to them, they will tell you the same thing. Basically, what we did is look mostly in the area of fringe benefits and do re-estimates of some of the assumptions that were made in that area so that we try to avoid touching programs as best as we can.
But to be clear, for the past 2 budget hearings where we've had these exchanges, those programs have been cut and fewer students were either able to engage in those programs or the benefits in those programs were in fact reduced. And with a $189 million cut is very significant. In your testimony and throughout this process, you have noted that you didn't cut or didn't want to cut revenue-generating expenses. That's still accurate, right?
Yeah.
And CUNY has one of the best returns on investment, with some studies saying 15 to 1. For every dollar invested, 15 comes back, and then ACE and ASAP alone, an additional between $3 and $4 per dollar invested. So I don't understand how cutting $189 million from programs that bring money back to New York City and put money in the pockets of New Yorkers aligns with that professed value of not cutting revenue-generating things in the budget.
As I indicated to you, you could talk to them, and to our knowledge, I don't believe any programs were cut or eliminated from CUNY. As I said, most of the funding that the PEG savings that we identified and found were in the areas of fringe benefits. And so, as I said, we will continue to work with CUNY to basically assess their needs going forward. And as we proceed, if they could identify, and particularly if we economy remains strong and stronger than we anticipate, we will work CUNY, we will work with the council, okay, to see if there was an area that they believe was impacted to either partially or fully restore, if there was an area. As far as we know, There was none because we were very careful in terms of where we took the PEG savings from CUNY. Basically, they were focused largely on the areas of fringe benefit, and we estimate those fringe benefits. So again, as I said, if from their perspective they believe there are areas, okay, we will work with them, we'll do an assessment, and if the economy remains strong or stays stronger than we anticipate, we will basically do a reassessment of their needs and then work with you to see what can be partially or fully restored.
AJ, it sounds like from your testimony, it sounds like you are saying that CUNY is fine with these cuts and they have found the savings and no services
as
to
far
students.
as we know, the area where we took the savings from CUNY were mostly in the fringe benefit, category. We re-estimate because our estimate of fringe benefits were much higher than actual costs. So we realign them.
So as far as you know, so does that mean that if CUNY comes back and says, you know what, actually these cuts are in fact devastating to our students, you'll then reverse the cuts?
I said to you, if economic conditions improve better than anticipated, okay, we will do a reassessment. If there are programming cuts, because as far as we know, we try not to have those. We will do a reassessment, and if conditions permit, we will work with the council to either partially or fully restore them.
I think it's important to note that these expenditures, so-called expenditures on CUNY, aren't expenditures, they're investments. And it appears that everyone sees the value in investing in CUNY, in our students. The return on investment is high. Our state sees the value in investing in CUNY. They just got a $75 million injection of private donation for the AI programs. So everyone sees it, but it seems that the city views this as a way to save money. And so I look forward to CUNY coming back and saying, you know what, $189 million is actually not manageable. It's going to hurt our programs because what you're telling me doesn't seem to align with what everyone else believes and what everyone else is saying.
As an immigrant, you don't have to remind me of how critical CUNY is. I know it. I have friends, I have family members gone to CUNY, and I see the impact of CUNY on their lives. So I know exactly, okay, what CUNY is, what CUNY means, what they accomplish, what they do, okay, for the population, okay? So from my perspective, as I said, we try our best not to cut programs at CUNY. But if they believe there are some, okay, if conditions permit, we will do an assessment, okay, and we'll work with the council to restore partly or fully whatever they think that was cut. Because from our perspective, we have done our ultimate best. As I said, we basically play in the area of fringe benefits, okay? We assume we're spending 7, when in reality we're spending 3. We'll realign the estimate of our assumptions with the reality, and we took the savings. So again, as I said, if they believe there are some, we will sit down with them and do an assessment.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Speaker.
Councilmember Krishnan, followed by Stevens and Lee.
Thank you so much, Speaker Adams, Chair Brannan. Good afternoon, Mr. Budget Director and OMB team. It's nice to see you all, and thank you for your testimony today. Just taking a step back, my question is, what is this administration's vision for the city? I don't mean just the economic approach. I see the approach here. But what conversations have you had with the mayor, and what is the vision of this administration for New York City?
The mayor had made it clear on many occasions.
Sorry, I can't hear, I'm sorry.
The mayor has made it clear on many occasions about his vision for the city. He wants a safe, clean city where you could raise a family, work, and without any fear, and have a good education system where the kids could go to school. I mean, he has made it clear on many occasions about his vision for New York City, and his budget also reflect, okay, his visions. That's the reason why you hear people talk about we do cuts, generalized cuts. In reality, no. We review every single one of the submissions by agencies. We see where we are in terms of our needs for resources and adjust appropriately. If we realize an agency cannot meet the PEC target and they don't have the resources, we basically exempt them. So this is, we've been extremely careful, as I was talking about CUNY. We've been extremely careful, okay, in terms of the changes that we made. As I said in my testimony, 95% of the savings that we took had no impact whatsoever, okay, on services in New York City. You don't have to take my word for it, okay? You could go to any one of the independent monitors, okay? So there is a small portion that's impacted, and it's our job to work around them to see what can be done, to do assessment of these things, to see what can be partially or fully resourced, as I said, if the resources are there. But the mayor resources are aligned with his visions.
So let's look at that for a second. So summarizing your point, vision being for the mayor, stated vision is a safe city that supports working families. Are you aware that there's a $60 million cut to school meals in our public schools?
I just discussed it.
It's not a cut. Let's rephrase. Are you aware that school lunch menus are being cut and schools are running out of food?
No, it's not true.
As a parent,
let me just say to you. Let me give you the facts again.
Right, sure, but it's a yes or no. Are you aware of it?
You're entitled to our opinion, but you're not entitled to your facts.
Sure, but it's a yes or no question.
Let me give you the facts.
Go ahead.
We swap federal tax dollars, okay, for city tax dollars, okay? That's one. Two, we invested significantly in food cafeteria, and as a result of the investment, okay, more kids are coming to the cafeteria because they're nicer. They're hanging out in the cafeteria. They're eating more.
But let me tell you,
because they're eating more, okay, because they're eating more, the DOE, okay, requested
Mr. Budget,
funding.
I'm on a clock, so I've got to jump in. I understand the math, but I'll tell you where the math isn't mathing. There are children like my own in my son's school, both my kids' schools, that are running out of food at lunch. My children and the others in the school, and many others across the city, that aren't eating lunch, that are borrowing lunch from their friends, because the school lunch menus are being cut. So however, whatever math and whatever budget metrics have been used, the point is, I'm sorry, Mr. Budget, the point is that school lunch menus are being cut. That's the on-the-ground reality. My second question is,
listen to me, we have no issue because it's not city tax dollars, it's federal tax dollars.
But whatever the numbers
what's the motivation for us
whatever the numbers are up here, this is the impact on the ground. My second question is, are you aware there's a $170 million cut to early childhood education?
Because we had 37,000 empty seats that we're paying for.
37,000 empty seats.
Can you imagine? This is a program that is funded by federal tax dollars. I'm going
to jump into the other point.
And we
so
have
I think
36,000 empty seats that the city
I'm sorry, Mr. Budget Director. I've got to keep moving. I'm going to look at the numbers, and I'm going to show you the impact. $170 million cut to early childhood education. Finally, you're also aware there's a $20 million cut to our Parks Department, right? Including 111 positions and $11 million for collectively swim programs, tree maintenance programs, and trail programs. You're aware of that cut to the Parks Department budget?
Yes.
Okay. So looking at all those, let me tell you the impact, put the dollar amounts aside. As I mentioned before, schools where lunch menus are being cut.
No.
And running out of food.
No.
Early childhood education, there are thousands of parents who desperately hoping to qualify for a 3K lottery, not having a seat.
Anyone who wants a seat can get a seat.
And finally, with these cuts, there are parks across the city that won't receive cleaning services. That's just a fact. There are swim programs that won't be running because of it. So parks won't be cleaned, playgrounds won't be cleaned, trees won't be maintained, and children won't learn how to swim while we have a lifeguard crisis in this city. So I don't know what the actual vision of this administration is, looking at all these pegs and cuts and haphazard restorations. But what I will say is the way the administration's approach and the impact of its budget approach is that this city is getting unaffordable for working families, that the support pillars that working families, older adults, and immigrants depend on are being cut, and working families are being pushed out of this city. And so I think the real question the administration should ask itself is, what is the vision for this city? What is their vision for this city? And quite frankly, right now, what we're looking at is one that, the numbers aside, the on-the-ground reality, the stories that we all hear from constituents day in, day out, whatever the vision may be, it is one that is, in fact, in reality, leaving out working families. Thank you.
Councilmember Stevens, followed by Lee, and then Osei.
Well, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It's been a long day. Thank you for staying in there with us. Just really quickly, I just want to start with Summer Rising because I know there was a big announcement regarding Summer Rising, and I have some feelings about it. And just thinking about going into the summer and understanding when Summer Rising did come to pass, it was like after COVID and really around like how do we get our young people to get their learning loss. But I feel like there's this constant battle when I'm talking to parents and providers where they're like, could we go back to camp? And like, why is that not an option? And I think that, you know, even looking at this budget and we're looking at cost savings and saying we're in a crisis, then we should save money where it makes sense. And I think this is a place where we could save some money at. And so I'm gonna jump right into it. In November plan, DYCD's Summer Rising budget was reduced by $19.7 million each year from FY25 through FY27 due to the low attendance for middle school students. The preliminary budget plan included a new need of $80 million in fiscal 2025 in DOEs for Summer Rising programs. I guess my first question is to think about what is the current funding for both DOE and DYCD budget for 24 and 25 for the Summer Rising program, and what services are being provided by each of the agencies? Why is the increase in DOE budget for the program but a decrease in DYCD program?
Yeah, currently we're talking about $239 million in fiscal year 24. And we have 129 in fiscal year 25. And DYCD is $149 million for 24 and 129 for 25. DOE is $80 million in 24 and $80 million in 25. So this is the breakdown of the budget for each one of these. Again, we hear your concerns regarding Summer Rising. I think we're going to have to talk to the Chancellor to see if they could do an assessment of, because from my perspective, we're going on the assumption, the premise that the program has been oversubscribed. Okay. So far.
What do you mean when you say oversubscribed?
Meaning we have more parents registering for their kids for this program every summer.
Well, we have to be careful when we say it's oversubscribed. It was actually more seats, so it was more available, so more parents were able to apply, whereas when it was just in the camp model, we had less seats. And so the oversubscription, I think we have to make sure we're careful about that.
No, we would have to see, you know, talking to parents, you know, do an analysis of which one of the model is better.
Yeah, and here's the thing, I'm not saying that we don't want some version of it, but I think when we're thinking about cost savings and when I'm speaking to parents and providers, it is much more cost effective. And to see that DOE is getting an increase and DYCD is getting a decrease is a problem for me in the sense of like, that means it's also not respecting the providers and the work that they're doing. And even when we're rolling out the program, what that looks like, right? You know, providers are doing this for a number of years, but I have a whole bunch of other questions, so I'm just gonna jump really quickly into ACS, because, you know, that's new to my portfolio. But my first question is, the preliminary plan included 180 million new needs increase from the state mandated related to foster care in fiscal 2024 only. Which state mandate did this increase relate to, and how was the funding amount determined, and how will this be utilized? And if there are rate changes, what were the changes that were made when they were instituted, and why was funding only labeled in fiscal 2024? When does the administration plan to right-size the baseline budget?
Again, as I said, we will continue to work with the agency. Continue to work with the agency to do an assessment. The rate, this relates to what I call the maximum state aid rate, which the city is required to pay for families in foster care. The amount is based on our fiscal year 24 projections. Okay?
And so this is for the foster care aid. But what state does it increase? What does this relate to? How's the funding amount determining how it's to be utilized? Like,
The
so
state basically increased the
the
rate.
state increased it,
the
and so it
rate,
was from
therefore
them.
we have to, yeah.
Okay. I have a number of questions, but I just feel like you guys have been here long enough, and I'll just reach out to you guys separately.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Lee, followed by Osei and Williams.
Which page?
Hello, sorry. Oy. All right. Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Speaker. Just wanted to quickly dive in. MOPD, Mayor's of Office for People with Disabilities. So as you know, it's been underfunded in recent years, and the office's fiscal 2025 budget is $477,000, which is 33% less than fiscal year 24's budget at adoption. And so just wanted to know, and this was, I think, an additional in this city. And so just wanted to know, given the critical services that the office provides to those with disabilities, why was the MOPD subject to such major cuts? I understand that there's headcount and pegs and all of that, but I would argue also that because the budget was only recently ramped up, because it was pretty small before, and I would say that, the ramp-up period takes time to hire and look for qualified staffing. And so just wanting to know about the cuts there.
Yeah, as you know, the MOPD is a policy coordinating entity. They don't actually engage in direct service programming. So they basically leverage other agencies, okay? But again, we, like you, we appreciate and understand the kind of works that they do. But as I indicated to everyone, the challenge that we're dealing with was so large in terms of the gap that we had to close that we had to rely asking every agency to make a contribution. But again, as we proceed and get closer to adoption, if based on our assessment and working with the council, if there is a need for MOPD, we would basically reassess and do a need assessment, and if there is a need, we will try to address it at the time.
Yeah, I would say if we could take a look at that, because $477,000 in their budget to honestly, I can't even imagine how difficult it is to just rein in all these huge, large city agencies, because I think disability should be part of each of the work that all these agencies do and incorporated in it. But that takes a lot of effort and resources and talent and time. And so if we could reevaluate this number, I think that'd be great, because I think it's nearly impossible for any commissioner to work with this budget that's supposed to touch upon 1 million people in the city. So just wanted to emphasize that. And then moving over to the next topic, which is on children and youth mental health services. There's a lack of focus on mental health of children and youth, and many parents are unaware of the mental health services that their children's schools provide. In addition, many critical mental health services in schools have been reduced with the results of the budget cuts, and there are not enough school social workers and clinicians available to deal with all the needs. And I've been hearing conflicting things from school principals as well as parents in terms of how the budget cuts have impacted, the school social workers. And so how much of the fiscal 2025 budget is for youth-specific mental health services, and how does that compare to the funding levels for FY24?
Yeah, last year we invested in 3 major initiatives that were announced as part of the state of the city. This is the Mental Health Access Digital Hub. We are putting almost $3.8 million baseline. We did an expanded clubhouse capacity. Again, that is $7 million was added baseline. And we also had the school telemental health, and that is another $9 to $10 million a year that was added, okay, just to address these 3 programs.
And also, has there been a focus on hiring bilingual clinicians?
I believe they're doing so.
Okay, and just really quickly, Chair, I know I'm over time, but just two more questions about, one is around the opioid settlement funds that the city was supposed to receive. Just wanting to know if, because last I checked, I believe we got 11 or 15 million, I believe, and spent down, if at all. And if there is sort of underspending in that area, whether addiction services.
We should definitely talk to you and put you in touch with our folks and work with the agencies to see what best can be done.
Okay, great, thank you.
Good afternoon, Director Jiha.
Good afternoon.
Sorry. I know there's a lot of us over here. I wanted to start just to ask some questions around HPD's capital budget. What is HPD's proposed capital budget for fiscal year 2025?
I believe it's 2025 is maybe 2025. I don't know if I have this here in front of me. Huh? On screen? I don't have it. 2025. I don't have it here. I don't have it here in front of me, but I will give it back to you in a moment. Yeah? Oh, 12 billion? $2.12 billion.
Well, can you say that one more time?
$2.12 billion.
$2.12 billion. And do you know the breakdown in terms of how much of that funding is going towards building affordable housing in New York City?
I would have to provide you a breakdown of all this information, okay?
That would be great,
Okay.
but, you know,
Okay.
$2.1 billion out of our over $100
This is the city portion.
Yes, out of our over $100 billion budget. Earlier in your testimony, you stated that there's a housing shortage in New York City. Do you think that amount shows how the admin is prioritizing that housing shortage, especially when it comes towards building affordable housing within New York City?
Housing is a priority of this administration. To be honest with you, we have over like $20 billion in the next 10 years. The challenge that we have, as I stated earlier, is a debt capacity issue. Okay, we have about $10 billion left in debt capacity, and schools, Bowlby's Jail, Bakery, these three projects way above that amount. That's the reason why we're lobbying Albany, and the governor included $12 billion in the budget, okay, for debt capacity expansion for the TFA. But even if you add that $12 billion, it's not going to be close to what we need here in New York City in terms of our infrastructure needs, housing needs, I mean, you name it. Okay, the debt capacity issue is real, okay? And I don't know how many times I have to say it. The fact that we have funding allocated for the Bowlby's Jail in a timeline that we know is not real, okay? Because we put the capital program on a pause as a result of COVID for a year and a half, and the timeline was created before COVID. So we know we're not gonna spend those resources by 2027. But yet, we have to keep those resources in the timeline that was created prior to COVID. So thereby, we have no room left. So it's not a question of priority, okay? It's not a question of wanting to put more money. We want to put more money.
Sure. So $2.21 billion allocated in the capital budget for HPD. We don't know what the breakdown is going towards affordable housing. You know, I speak about this often, and I know that, you know, housing is a #1 priority for this council, the administration, and many New Yorkers who probably speak to the mayor about what their issues are. You know, last year, the Biden administration passed the Build Back Better Act, where $1 trillion was allocated to go towards infrastructure needs as well as housing. I believe $200 billion is supposed to go to New York State. How is this administration working on pulling some of that money down, especially to address our housing shortage within New York City?
We have a team of folks constantly working, looking for grants. This is what we do every day. But again, I would defer to HPD to give you specifically what they're doing, okay, in terms of trying to tap into those resources.
Sure. And I'm sure you're playing a role in terms of securing some of those contracts from
We do. We
Build Back
provide them the
Better, correct?
resources, all the resources that they need. Okay, basically to do to do the applications, to look for the opportunities. We work with them.
Has any money
But,
been pulled down?
I can't give you. I don't know from the top of my head. No, I would get back to you to find out. I will work with HPG to find out exactly if they have gotten some resources from them.
Great. I would love to get an answer back on that. You know, I think when there's a large sum of money that is allocated towards our state,
You have to remember the majority of the HPD's budget is funded by the federal government.
Sure.
So, but specific grants here and there, I have to go back to them and talk to them.
Of course, but you know, of course, hearing that the housing shortage and the crisis is a priority of this administration, would love to see that taken seriously. And I'm sure it has been, but would love some transparency in terms of the progress of pulling some of that money down, and how the council could aid in providing some assistance in the projects that come across all of our portfolios.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Director.
Thank you.
Councilmember Williams.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing very well.
Good. You know my issues, so I will start with the Commission on Human Rights. And similar to the November plan, the preliminary plan includes a PEG that will reduce the Commission on Human Rights Law Enforcement's budget by $676,000 in fiscal 2024, and a vacancy reduction of 8 positions beginning in fiscal 2027. The Commission on Human Rights, as you know, is such a small agency, and these reductions will impact the agency's work regarding enforcement, training, communications, and operations. And so, you know, there's no doubt that the second wave of reductions will affect service deliverables. And so wanted to know if these PEGs will be reversed in the executive budget to backfill those vacant positions.
Again, at this point in time, I cannot make any commitment. However, if our economic conditions is better than we anticipated in January, and resources are available, we will discuss with the council and see what can be done.
Thank you. And just overall, I know you guys have a hard task, but if you could help me understand how the administration justifies imposing such cuts on much smaller agencies with a budget that makes up only a small fraction of the city's overall budget.
Again, the challenge is the scope and the size of the challenge, the problems that we had, and as a result, as I said, it was a whole hands on deck approach where we asked every agency to make a contribution. And we understand that, as I said, some agencies have less capacity to handle the PEGs, and that's the reason why we review the budget. And if we realize they don't have the wherewithal to absorb the PEGs, we provide them some exemption. But again, this is the scope and the size of the challenge was so big that we had to make sure that every agency participate.
Thank you. Similar with the Equal Employment Practices Commission's headcount, 2025 budget is $1.2 million with 12 full-time budget positions. And since last year, EEPC has requested an additional 17 headcount, yet the November plan included a PEG saving of $64,000. I know we like to say drop in the bucket about millions, but this is $64,000 to EEPC's budget, and the preliminary plan does not include increases to the agency's staffing level. So again, would love to know if there's any plan to increase EEPC headcount in the executive plan, and how many headcounts will be added.
Again, I hear you. I know it's small, but every little thing contributes to the big picture, to the big challenge that we have to deal with. And as I said earlier, if conditions warrant, we will work with the council and see what can be done.
Okay, yeah, a lot of these agencies, I would say EEPC specifically, unfortunately or fortunately, however you look at it, the council, we love to pass a lot of laws, and a lot of these laws create a burden for agencies, and the council has passed a ton of laws that require EEPC to do a ton of things, and historically, in the past, they have fell behind the charter mandates because they just don't have the proper funding for staff, economists. I think the $64,000 was to hire a part-time GC, so this is even smaller than the commission, and just really want to understand or even get from you how you anticipate the agency in fulfilling their charter mandates without proper staffing.
Yeah. Again, as I said, there was a rationale for it, but as I said, if condition warrants, as we proceed, we will work with you and see what can be done to address this particular issue.
Okay, thank you. Then one off topic, because it's just a little interest of mine, and I know you and I spoke about it before, about Rikers. Can you just, I know you said it already in your testimony, but because the money has to be set aside to fulfill previous laws for us to have borough-based jails, can you just say it one more time, help us to understand how that impacts the current budget and your inability to have flexibility because you have to keep this money locked, even though there's really not a legitimate, viable plan to actually use this money anytime soon?
Yeah, that's the challenge that we're dealing with on the capital plan side. Currently, as I said, we have a very limited capacity, which is about $10 billion, and
$10 billion?
about left.
Okay.
And to do everything that we need to do in terms of our capital plan. And now we have to do a redistribution of the funding because our capital plan is front-loaded. So, but one of the challenges that we have, we cannot move the funding that is allocated for Rikers, even though we know for sure that the resources are not going to be utilized. Okay, because the timeline that was created for Rikers was prior to COVID, okay, which is 2027, August 2027. Now, we have to keep the funding there, even though we know the timeline is not accurate. We will not spend those resources by 2027. So what we have to do is basically every capital program that is in the same time frame, we have to move them back because we don't have the room to accommodate them if we have to keep the funding for Rikers at, in the timeline where they currently are. So that's the challenge we're dealing with. And improvement to Rikers, we cannot use capital tax dollars. We have to use expense dollars, which we don't have, okay, to make any improvement because we cannot capitalize, okay, those funding because the capital rules require that the funding, the asset has to be at least 5 years. Okay, we don't have 5 years left. Okay, so these are the timeline create a major challenge for us in terms of managing the capital program and at the same time making investment into Rikers as is to improve conditions.
So just hypothetically, last question, hypothetically, like if the timeline was changed, would that give you more flexibility to manipulate the capital budget to, let's say, put more money into other projects?
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have Councilmember Riley, followed by Ressler.
Thank you so much, Chair. Good afternoon, Director. Just a quick couple of questions on housing. So Local Law 167 of 2023, the Speaker's Fair Housing Plan requires the city to create a fair housing assessment and plan every 5 years. By 2026, the city must produce 5-year production targets distributed to community district level and strategic equity framework that will report on the progress. So with that being stated, has OMB added the necessary funding to DCP and HPD to implement the Fair Housing Plan? And how might OMB use the 5-year production target to guide capital planning and budgeting?
We're currently working right now. There is an existing housing team and HPD that is currently working on this planning for this. But again, we would have to provide you, in terms of the guidelines, the federal guidelines, we would have to come back to you and tell you exactly what DCP, HPD, what their needs are, what the plans are in terms of going forward to address the 5-year reduction targets that you're talking about here.
Okay, so you could get back to us.
We're going to have to get back to you.
Thank you so much, Director. And to piggyback, you mentioned that there's funding set aside for the borough-based jails. How much funding is set aside currently?
Currently, we're at $8 billion already in the plan, and we have to add another $4 billion.
Thank you. Wanted to touch on NYC Swims. The governor made her announcement that she wanted to renovate and construct swimming pools throughout New York State. Currently now, with that plan and the money that she allocated, how much of that is going to come to New York City? And did you guys project on how many swimming pools from having access or even Wi-Fi access to get the funding out to these families as soon as possible? Is there any plan for OMB to work with the Public Administrator's Office to adequately fund them? Because I believe when we're dealing with housing, currently right now, there's housing currently within our communities that could be accessible to families who are in need.
We will definitely work with your office, okay, to see what the needs are, what's the reason why they are not currently on the city server, and what can we do working with OTI to mitigate that problem.
Thank you so much, Director.
Thank you so much, Speaker Adams and Chair Brannon, and thank you to the panel for joining us today. I just wanted to start following up on a letter that Chair Brannon and I sent to OMB last month, and we just received a response yesterday, just to confirm the information that was shared from OMB to the Council relating to cost shifts and increased costs that the City of New York is contributing into Albany. Over the last $22 billion, is that right?
Yes.
And payments made to the state have increased from approximately $143 billion. Payments made by the city to the state have increased from approximately $143 billion a decade ago to $245 billion in FY24, and we're on pace to exceed that this year. Is that right?
Yes.
So that's a 71% increase over the last decade of the amount of money that the city is paying into Albany, and it's a 25% increase since the beginning of the Adams administration. That is an extraordinary burden that has been placed on the City of New York, on you and on us and on all of the taxpayers of New York City, and it's an unfair one. So I hope that we can work together to push Albany so that we get our fair share back in return. There were significant cost shifts during the previous mayor and governor. I thought things might be better in the dynamics between the mayor and the governor today. They have not gotten better. It has gotten worse. And this is a matter of the public record, and we need it to be a part of the conversation in Albany over the next 30 days.
Looking forward to work with you, Councilmember, on this. And
Thank you.
As I indicated to you, in this current budget, we have about $200 million, an additional $200 million a year. Okay. That is cost shifted to New York. They took over from us, this is intercept. So be more than happy to work with you. We have a study being conducted for the city by CUNY in terms of the balance of payments between the city and the state, how much we contribute more to the state. And then we'll be more than happy to share that study with you. Once
It certainly makes a real difference for us to have a more equitable cost share and responsibility with the city and the state. I am concerned about some of the mayor and your decisions and the impact that it's having on the budget. So I'd like to just touch on a few items of real concern. OMB exempted a number of titles from the prelim peg cuts. DOB was, and we had thought DOB was going to be among them, but DOB was in fact enforced to reduce inspector positions. Considering the PMMR found that DOB's average response times to priority B complaints increased 2 full days, almost 20% increase, why did OMB require reductions to the DOB inspector workforce, and are those going to be restored?
We will work with you because our objective initially was to exclude or to exempt, And I will get back to you because I thought they were excluded, but if they're not
That was our
excluded, we will-
understanding of what was to be
Yeah,
expected. I'm
you know.
disappointed it didn't happen, so we appreciate you circling back with us.
They were not part of the freeze, but I will get back to you if that's the case.
We have set exceptionally ambitious standards for large private buildings across the city to reduce their environmental emissions, their carbon emissions with Local Law 97. I'm very concerned that the city is not setting an example and that we are telling our constituents that they need to decarbonize their buildings, but we're failing to take care of our own house. If you look at the budget cuts that you all have proposed for this year, we saw a $1 billion cut to the DCAS capital plan. And my understanding is that last year, the DCAS commissioner testified there were about $500 million in projects that were dedicated to energy conservation, green capital projects to reduce our emissions. We saw a cut in the capital plan of $294 million. So if those numbers are right, it's about a 60% cut that the city made to decarbonize our own buildings. Additionally, we saw a $15 million cut in this fiscal year on electric vehicle purchasing and $15 million more in the out years. These are deeply concerning cuts. The mayor signed Local Law 140 into law requiring us to have an all-electric fleet by 2038. We can't accomplish those goals with the cuts that you've made. So what am I supposed to tell my constituents? That they need to decarbonize, but that the city is failing to do the job?
We are as concerned as you are, and I keep coming back to the same issue over and over. The reason we have those cuts is because we have a challenge with our debt limit.
All right, well, let's talk about the debt limit, because keep saying the same thing all day, and I have to say, I really don't, I don't think it's fair. And the reason I don't think it's fair, the reason I don't think it's fair is as follows. The administration has not engaged the council in any substantive way about updates or modifications to the closed Rikers plan. If you want to have a conversation about how we can make reasonable alterations and modifications, then let's have that conversation. But that hasn't happened at all. And so to say that your hands are tied, but you're refusing to engage at the same time is disingenuous. And furthermore, there was a viable plan on the table to preserve the structure of the BQE and the triple cantilever, which is in my district. The administration chose to take an alternative approach that's going to cost at least $5 billion and probably much more. You could have done something at 10% of that cost and preserved the structure for a 20 to 30-year time frame, provided greater optionality for the city, and avoided the challenges that you're facing around debt capacity. Those were decisions that this administration made that is tying your hands. So to claim that it's our fault or that it's anyone else's responsibility is, I think, misleading. The administration, if you want to engage in a conversation about closed Rikers, talk to us. Nobody responds from Deputy Mayor Banks' shop, from Lisa Zornberg's shop, to engage us in a serious conversation about how we're going to get closed Rikers back on track. We hear radio silence, crickets. I have the Brooklyn Jail in my district. I work closely with the Department of Design and Construction to try to make this project viable and to support the closure of Rikers. But this administration has not engaged us in a serious or rigorous way. And if you want to do so, let's have the conversation.
We're not blaming the council for the debt capacity problem.
No.
Debt capacity problem has to do with the property values in New York, okay? Because debt capacity is
in OT spending for the NYPD while cutting libraries, while cutting 3K and more. How do you justify giving $1 billion in overtime spending to the NYPD when they are clearly not doing anything about the increased response times that pose a real threat to safety in our communities?
One of the things that the PMMR also indicated is that congestion is a major challenge in terms of response time. So we
Response times are not down for FDNY. They're not down for ambulances. It's only the NYPD.
No, every one of them is having the same challenge with respect to response time because of congestion.
We should go on the data because that's not true.
We definitely should.
But this is what I'll say in closing. PMMR paints a very different picture than the one you're telling. Agencies have faced 7 rounds of budget cuts and
can be done. But again, as I said, if conditions warrant, we will work with you, work with everyone to see what can be done for the not-for-profit.
Okay, I just want to leave that on the record as being a priority of the council. Thank you.
We have Councilmember Lewis, followed by Nurse.
Thank you, Chair and Speaker. Good to see you. Director Jiha. All right, I have 3 quick questions, so I'm going to just say all of them so I don't lose too much time, and then we could go over them. So in January, the administration unveiled Women Forward, an action plan that includes a $43 million investment aimed at making New York City a national leader to become the most woman-forward city in the country, with the portion of investments for Women Forward NYC supported through city dollars to dismantle barriers in sexual, reproductive, and chronic health care, along with reducing domestic violence. How is the PEG affecting Women Forward? Also, second question, Women Forward is a cross-section partnership collaboration on health, tech, and business, particularly for DOH-MH. How does the hiring freeze reduction in DOH-MH from $11.6 million in FY24 to $5.2 million in FY25 impact the efficacy to sustain the mayor's commitment to gender equity? My last question is regarding asylum seekers. As reduction in asylum seekers population continues to grow in our city, we have a great need for legal services to provide these services to enable many asylum seekers to separate themselves from the city's shelter system, reducing their cost to the city. I wanted to know in the preliminary plan, how does your team expect to include any funding in fiscal 25 for asylum seekers' work authorization applications and other legal services? And why is it only in FY24 but not FY25? Thanks.
Yeah, in terms of the Women Forward initiatives, I believe we added $43 million in the budget. This is a citywide, as you know, it's a citywide initiatives and involve many agencies. I'm going to get back to 2 because I don't remember exactly, but for the last one, the asylum seeker, I believe we added $11 million in the preliminary budget to support the operations of the Asylum Seeker Application Help Center, that provide legal services for asylum seekers in our care. And I don't remember the
So that the legal services is included with the authorization for...
Yes,
okay,
all legal services.
Now, regarding Women Forward NYC, I wanted to ask, how is the PEG Forward NYC? I wanted to ask, how is the PEG any of the agencies, including DOH-MH, that now has a reduction?
That is different, but this is an initiative. The initiative is funded $43 million citywide. But so reduction in DOH-MH or any other place have nothing to do with that particular initiative itself.
So it wouldn't impact the actual initiative?
Yeah.
Got it. All right, thank you.
Councilmember.
For like the 2/3 of the population right now, we're talking, which is currently at Rikers, it's about $12 billion.
12 billion? Okay, that's not what we've been hearing.
It was $8 billion initially that was included, and we have to add another $4 billion.
And when do you plan to reflect that? What's driving this increase?
Costs of construction, particularly steel. The price of steel has doubled.
Great. Okay, and related to the Board of Corrections PEG, I know Councilmember Brewer asked about this, but just to build on what she asked, in fiscal year 2023, lawsuits and monitors for the DOC cost the City of New York approximately $51 million. The city preliminary budget in FY24 included a request for $3 million for the Board of Corrections to bolster their monitoring staff for 27 new positions. The council negotiated $400,000 to be included in the adopted fiscal 24 budget to give some more money to BOC to investigate different issues that came up. But these two positions were removed as part of the PEGs. So how are PEGs savings calculated when reductions and restrictions end up costing the city more in the end?
These PEGs were basically what we call underspending savings, and as a result of lower than budgeted headcount. And we also took some savings on from vacancies. Again, it comes right back to the scale of the challenge that we face, and at the time we ask every agency
Yeah,
to make
no,
a
I
contribution.
understand. My understanding is that some of these positions, you know, these are investigators, these are research assistants, and the salaries being offered aren't really matching the talent and skill sets, what they would be paid outside and other in the private sector, which is why it's quote unquote maybe not being fully utilized. So hopefully that can be looked at and considered. Last year, DOC also cut contracts for some of the critical service providers on Rikers. And then we found that, you know, DOC's attempts to do some of that programming just wasn't adequate enough to cover what those providers were doing. So now we're hearing, maybe informally, that DOC has invited these providers back, but without a new contract or compensation. So how is or compensation. So how I mean, not necessarily for free, but without additional compensation?
We are working with DOC, and as I said, we do an assessment of their needs. And I believe they've been talking to those providers. And as we move forward closer to budget to exec, we will make a decision one way or another in terms of how we're going to proceed with whether we're going to continue this program. And if there is a need to continue this program, we will make the appropriate adjustment at exec.
Okay. For sanitation, you know, I asked about this the last time I saw you. We were rolling out this curbside program. We had a year of Queens under the belt. Then we rolled out Brooklyn. The numbers are kind of, you know, corresponds with cutting a lot of the contracts. A lot of those workers who were out doing outreach and spreading the word and helping people understand why it's important, those folks were laid off. And then DSNY got a lot of their outreach and communications budget cut. And I think at the last hearing we had last week, we were showing that the capture rate for organics is only at 4. In these two boroughs is just going straight into the trash, basically making this program. In these two boroughs is just going straight into the trash, basically making this program.
I believe that the citywide program that we launch is more effective than those small programs. But I also believe that there is.
I understand the difference, but those folks were doing outreach parts of their work as well.
I also believe that there is an education piece that is missing.
Yeah.
Okay. I believe if we educate our folks, okay, they would take. Piecemeal here, piecemeal there. I think a citywide program is a lot more effective, is the approach that we should take. But I also believe that we also have to do a lot more in terms of education so that more people could participate in the program.
Yeah, I mean, this participation and capture rate is so
Yes.
embarrassingly low,
Yes,
and it will make
yeah.
this. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Director, thank you.
Thank you.
We look forward to negotiating with you as we head deeper into budget season.
Yes.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
All right, we'll take a break, and we're going to hear from the City Controller.
Try to make it as boring as I can. No news, nothing.
But I got you.
All right. Really a pleasure. Man.